Boy, how about that USFL right now? Boy, that USFL talk. I got to tell you, I'm really, really excited about the USFL. Psych, it's Friday, everybody. You think we're going to really open up with the USFL? No, we're going to talk about all the latest happenings in the major sports right now. I think everybody that just heard that had a heart attack right now. But no, there is a lot going on right now. Obviously, we're all wearing Met shirts. That's a triple player sweep for us. We'll definitely get into that. But there is a lot to get into here on Sportswire Radio, as we are now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, also our flagship, sportnarium.com/player, and of course, now on Roku with the Northeast Streaming Sports Channel. You can also catch us tomorrow on the Tobacco Road Radio. I want to thank Desmond Johnson, as always, for his support. And I'm with two of my guys here from Sportswire Radio, and of course, my guy, Justin Gianelli. Love hearing Justin Gianelli on the Baseball Banter Show. Quickly become one of my favorite shows. Listen, forget about hearing Chris Russo, forget about MLB Network. I just love hearing Justin Gianelli talk about all the latest happenings here in the world of Major League Baseball. Of course, he is a staple on Sportswire Radio. And of course, my other guy here, he drives us crazy, but we love him. And that's, of course, the legendary Brute Force Brad Weiss, the former, I guess, do we call it SJC New York now, Golden Eagle? And, of course, Level Up. We'll get into that, of course, from the Brew Crew and the Long Island Nets and Plainview JFK. Can never forget about that, the boys JV team. And, guys, happy Friday, and what's going on?
Not much. Ready to rock and roll yet again.
A lot to talk about here. And obviously, no, we're not going to talk USFL, but I got to get into the NBA playoffs here because.
Wait, you know what about the Pittsburgh Mauler player that got cut for not getting a slice of pizza because he didn't want chicken salad?
Well, you know, it's funny. I actually had a slice of pizza just before I went on the air. In fact, I had 3 of them at Joe and Pat's. I had 3 cracker round slices because I didn't have my squares, but we'll definitely get into that for sure in a little while. But to open things up here, the NBA playoffs, I got to be honest, this is the first time in a long time that I'm not just watching the Nets or the Knicks. I'm watching the entire playoffs. And right now, guys, I'm watching the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks. And it almost seems like, in a way, it's a trend throughout most of these series here. And right now, the Miami Heat seem to be that trend, like the Golden State Warriors and like some of the other teams that we've seen here that have had dominant starts, the Philadelphia 76ers, and we'll see about some of the other series. We'll certainly get into the Nets. But I want to go with Justin first, and let's talk about the Miami Heat. Let's start easy. We'll certainly get to the others later in the Nets and such, but let's start with the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks here. I had some promise for this series, but set the tables and where we are right now when it comes to the Miami Heat. Looks like they might be on the verge of having a firm control here in this series.
Yeah, I think the Atlanta Hawks look a little bit overwhelmed in the series, and you could tell. I mean, this is a team that had to play twice last week with the play-in. They had to play the Charlotte Hornets, and then they had to go and play the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, you know, you're already talking about 2 playoff games under their belt, play-in games, if you will. You know, just to face the team that was, you know, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and the Miami Heat were a number 1 team for good reason. You know, you talk about Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and then the key contributors.
Tyler Hero, obviously.
Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus. I mean, they're a well-built team, and, you know, and for my money, if not one of, probably the best coach in the NBA, Eric Spoelstra. I mean, he's been there for such a long time, and he's had such a big impact on how consistently good. I mean, I know it was the bubble a couple years ago, but how in the hell does he get that Miami Heat team to the NBA Finals? You know, so
and he's still so young, by the way, Coach Spoelstra. You think about how long he's been
he took over in his 30s. I'd be shocked if he's
frankly a peer of ours.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he's hit 50 at this point, if not in his like early 50s. But you know, Eric Spoelstra has such good control of this team, and that's what you need in the NBA. Because look, quarters 1, 2, and 3, talent can take over. Quarter 4, all about coaching.
Oh, we've seen that for sure. We've definitely seen that for sure.
Tight final minutes of the game. You know, you need the better coach. And look, that nothing against Nate McMillan, because Nate McMillan's a terrific NBA coach, and what he's done
absolutely
what he's done with the Atlanta Hawks should not be dismissed. But
sure.
At the time, you know, you're rarely going to be on the short end of the stick when your coach is Eric Spoelstra, and they're always well prepared. They're always well coached. Even when they don't get off to the best of starts like tonight, they're able to rally their way back. And now they look like they're, like you said, they're in control, and they're very well likely to go up 3-0 and overwhelm the Atlanta Hawks.
Absolutely. And I got to say, Justin, I'm liking the potential facial hair look. I'm liking potentially the facial hair now. Maybe that's might
I'm
be
not
a sign.
not shaving until the Brooklyn Nets win a game. So if that means I have to go until October when they get swept.
Well, in that case, I'm hoping it's tomorrow night then after you get the razor blade here. So, I mean, obviously, I almost have to take that back then. But we'll definitely get into that for sure in a little while. And obviously, want to bring in the brute force, Brad Weiss. Also, shout out, of course, our very dear friend, Mr. Anthony J. Finkel. And he says, Friday night sports night with the boys, best night of the week. Let's go. Yeah, no, definitely. I've been looking forward to this all throughout the week. In fact, when we're off the air, I'm already counting down to 7 days from now. So, I mean, forget about all the other shows I do live. I'm always looking forward to being with our flagship show here of Sportswire Radio and the Brute Force. Obviously, good to be with you. A lot to talk about here in the NBA playoffs. And piggybacking off Justin here, I mean, the Miami Heat, I mean, Eric Spoelstra, I mean, we always talk about great coaches, but Eric Spoelstra, maybe we overlook him in a sense. Maybe it's because of the different players he's had and, maybe the success. But at the end of the day here, I mean, talk about the Miami Heat, and it looks like they're about to go into firm control here in this series over the Atlanta Hawks.
Damn right they are. And listen, I'm glad Tom Bryce, that you started with this series, because I'm off to a rocking hard start right now, okay? Because here's the thing. And first of all, Tom, you mentioned that you had some pizza. So did I tonight. I was over at Rico's Pizza again before this game, hanging out with one of my buddies.
I did see the Yelp. I saw the Yelp images. I have to say, Rico looked good.
Yeah,
Rico,
by the way, I had a slice of pizza too. I got it free.
We're all doing the same vibe, but
that's the best pizza.
They ordered it from Ivarone's in Plainview.
I heard of Ivarone's actually.
Well, that place is good too.
And we know an Ivarone, Mr. Brufos. Andrea.
We do. A really good SJNY player now. But anyway, the reason why I mention it is because I was hanging out with my buddy James Cronin. Now, for those who don't know James Cronin, he is a big Trae Young fan. He actually walked into Rico's wearing a Trae Young jersey. And we went to the game. We went to Rico's on purpose because we wanted to meet up and watch this game, because James was all, the Atlanta Hawks are going to win this game, blah, blah, blah. And he was looking great at the beginning. We had to wait 45 minutes for them to inspect this magic box that was outside of the arena. Again, I think that the Atlanta Hawks were trying to ice the Miami Heat by delaying the game by putting some random box. But that's me with speculation. But anyway, listen, in the end, the Miami Heat are the better team. Okay, the Miami Heat are a team where the Atlanta Hawks, and their role players have played well tonight. I'll give them credit. But guess who's not playing well tonight? Guess what? It's Trae Young. Okay, Trae Young, this series has had a very difficult time having any success. Why? Because the Miami Heat have pride in their defense. They guard him. They can switch with anyone. All right, 1 through 5, they can have any one of their guys guard Trae Young. They're very athletic. Right, they're long, they're physical, and they've done a great job all series. The first game, they held to 8 points. The second game, he had 25 points, but he had a double-double with turnovers. He had 10 turnovers in that game. And then tonight, he's only got 14 points, but they're making every single...
And apparently, there we go.
So, in the end, I mean, listen, like I said, James Cronin's been doing all this chatting, all right, and before I left, he's like, don't forget to give me a shout-out when Atlanta wins. Well, guess what?
Where is James Cronin right now? Why isn't he on this stream like everybody else is right now? Where is James Cronin?
He's probably still at Rico's, praying that the Hawks win. But anyway, right now, Miami looks like they're in a good spot. Like you said, Spoelstra is a coach that deserves a lot more recognition and respect. I think it's the fact that there are so many other coaches, and there's a lot of younger, coaches that are coming up that we kind of take for granted a guy like Spoelstra who's had all this success and makes this, a team, in a very competitive Eastern Conference, the 1 seed once again. And you look at all these players they developed that haven't even been drafted, like a Duncan Robinson and other players, like a Max Strus we didn't know about, to a Gabe Vincent. You go down their roster, these are guys that weren't exactly, the top guys in a draft. They were just guys that they developed, and now they're becoming very key role players around great players like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, obviously the 6th man of the year, Tyler Hero, who you guys know I've talked about in the past. So it's definitely important.
Yeah, he's not the 6th man of the year, scoring 21 a game almost. Clearly.
Oh, that might be worse than robbery. That is robbery, but it might be worse. So
it might be worse than what the stock market did today for Coach Jason Gordiessa, who knows a little bit about that. So that would be how much of an injustice that would be.
So, and by the way, Coach Guardiazzo, I guess we're going SJ space U. I mean, we can't do SJU. That's St. John. So,
do we go SJNY? I mean, what do we say?
it's
SJNY?
got to be
I mean,
SJLI, SJBK. It's got to be an SJ New York. I mean,
what do we do with our old like SJC gear? Do we still wear it? Do we what do we do with that now? Is it like momentum?
That's going to be a tough question because I think everybody has SJC gear. From
I was looking at my SJC lacrosse shirt, and I'm like, do I bring it on the stream? I mean, Coach Guardiazzo, do you have a thought on that? I mean, what do we do with that?
So, listen, in the end, I just want to make this final point because I know he's going to be listening, and he was actually talking to me about coming on the show eventually. So, James Cronin, you're going to get your chance. But right now, you're in big trouble because you're wearing that Trae Young jersey. You're embarrassing yourself in front of many people who are at Rico's Pizzeria right now because they're going to lose. You put money on them to win on top of that, amongst others who were at that bar. So you guys are going to be all wrong. Miami's winning. And not only are they winning, I think I might have to get the broom out. I might have to go to James Cronin's job office on Monday and sweep his office because they're going to sweep him.
Wow, boy, this is brute-like response to say the least. I want to know, and I think those listening and watching this want to know, what did you order? Did you order a round slice, a Sicilian slice with toppings? I'm actually curious.
So the popular thing, and for those who know Rico's, they have what you call hot oil pizza. And all their pizza is thin crust. So it's hot oil, but it's actually really good. Kick into it.
Hot oil? What's the matter with people? Hot oil? I'm not used to hot oil on my pizza.
Well, either way, you might think it's crazy, but when you have a slice, you'll be like, oh, my God. So
I grew up
really
in Brooklyn. I could never imagine the old Italian guy growing up in Bay Ridge and Bensonhurst would make me a pizza slice with hot oil on it. I mean, it better be good, the Brute Force.
Listen, I'll tell you confidently it is. And also I had some wings with Rico sauce. That was pretty good too.
All right, the wings sounds good. The wing sounds good. And Aunt Laura sort of agrees, I guess. Does that mean Aunt Laura agrees or disagrees? I don't know. But shout out to Aunt Laura. And of course, shout out to Coach Guardiazzo here. And obviously the Heat definitely look like they are in firm control here, to say the least. And I want to move over to the other series in the Eastern Conference. I'm going to get to the Nets, but I kind of want to run everything up because I feel like Justin's going to be worked up, and I want to kind of build up, kind of like in wrestling, because we had a whole big wrestling angle here today on the radio, and I kind of want to build to that moment. So we'll build to that, but I want to go over to the other series, which is the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors. You know, guys, we were speaking about this series last week in our Sportswire radio group. It seemed like the both of you were confident that the Toronto Raptors really could do something here in this series, but unfortunately, the last I checked right now, the Philadelphia 76ers are up 3-0. So I want to go to my guy, Justin Gianelli. And Justin, talk to me about what's going on here and why the Toronto Raptors have not made this much of a series so far.
Well, it's because one team has Joel Embiid, the other team doesn't.
Let's
just put it straight.
Yeah.
I mean, Joel Embiid is showing why he's been a firm MVP candidate all season long. I mean, and look, give James Harden credit. His shooting is still trash, but he's been a good facilitator. And you look at games 1 and 2. You got really solid performances from Tyrese Maxey and Danny Green. The Philadelphia 76ers are a very complete bunch, and they're a team that's hard to defend because they get to the free throw line so often. And if you give Joel Embiid an inch of space down in the paint, he's gonna dunk it on you, and if not, you're gonna foul him. He's gonna go to the line. So you're kind of put in that lose-lose scenario where you're gonna get into foul trouble because you just don't have any defense for either James Harden or Joel Embiid. Harden gets a lot of his points at the free throw line as well, and they combine to take like 50, 60 free throws a game, it seems, and you could say it's good defense by Toronto, but they're playing over aggressive. The refs are calling them, and it's allowing the Sixers to get a lot of free points at the line, even if they're not shooting the ball particularly well. I mean, you thought Toronto was going to have Game 3. The Sixers stormed back, and guess who? Joel Embiid hit the game-winning 3 right before the buzzer. So, I thought this was going to be a really good series. I mean, you saw most of the game in Game 3. Not having Matisse Thybulle, hurting the defense of the Sixers for sure. But, when you have the talent that they do and the scorers that they do, the Sixers are never out of a ball game. So, they're going to be a legitimate threat. Obviously they're good. Obviously they're in great position to win the series. I mean, no team has ever lost a series in the NBA when leading 3-0. But at the same time, you're looking at the Sixers prospects past this round. I mean, look, they're in really good shape right now. They really are.
They definitely look good, and there's no question that Joel Embiid is definitely somebody that is an MVP candidate, to say the least, put it very kindly here. And for whatever reason, the Bruce West, I'm thinking of that Eminem song, Guess Who's Back? Guess Who's Back? With all these series, the Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, an Eminem song is coming to mind. But obviously here, 76ers, you were on the record with, correct me if I'm wrong, the brute force. Remember last week on Sportswire Radio, and remember you had like a little TV in the background, and you said upsets alert with the little alarm. I happen to like it. But right now, it would be an upset if the Toronto Raptors maybe even win more than one game right now. So, for those that might be watching, listening to this, we are now live on Roku. We'll be on tomorrow on Tobacco Sports Road Radio and Desmond Johnson's company. What's going on here and why we're not seeing an upset this series?
Yeah, well, let me start with this. So my predictions for my upsets last week, both have been hot trash and borderline just awful. I really can't find another word for it. They're just two bad picks on my part. We'll get to the other one later. I'll have a lot of words to say about that team. But this team, listen, and Justin Gianelli actually gave you the perfect answer. One team has Joel Embiid, the other one simply doesn't. Now, it's actually funny that Nick Nurse, and you guys mentioned teams never came back from 3-0. Well, Nick Nurse came on his press conference today and said, well, there's been teams that come back from 3-1, and all we have to do is win one game, and maybe we could do it. So, he's just thinking about the next game. Which is, listen, the right thing to do as a coach. But in the end, we all know that the Toronto Raptors are in big trouble. They had their golden chance at Game 3. Obviously, the game got to overtime, and Joel Embiid hit that shot. Even though, I at least me, in the regular, in the fourth quarter, Joel Embiid taking 3-pointers at the end of that game where he could have just went right to the basket and probably finished the game in regulation was a question mark. But in the end, that they drew up that great play, give a credit to Doc Rivers, and he gets that open shot, he hits it. So, in the end, listen, obviously, like Justin said, I think the key in this series, obviously Joel Embiid, but you can't say enough about this kid, Tyrese Maxey. This kid has been unbelievable. All 3 games, he's been, a 20-point scorer. One game, obviously, upwards to 30. He's been great. He's been shooting the ball well. He's been making plays. Him and Harden in the backcourt have been playmakers as well as shot makers. Even though, like Justin said, James Harden's not shooting his best, but he's still finding a way to and make plays for his teammates. So in the end, this Philadelphia team, like I said, I was worried about how Harden would perform and how the rest of the team, and also the depth on this team. This team only plays like 7 guys. So that's what I was worried about when I picked Toronto to win this series. But they have completely proved me wrong. Joel Embiid has proved me wrong. James Harden has done his job. Even Tobias Harris, even though he hasn't had a great series, he's been getting a few double-doubles and making a difference. So you talked about Danny Green. And ultimately is having a key part in this series. So they're all taking their part. They're playing good defense as well. Toronto just seems to have been a little overwhelmed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They just haven't found a way to be consistent enough, and that's hurt them in all 3 games. So until they're more consistent offensively, they're not going to be able to win, and it might be another sweep that might see Toronto in Game 4.
That's why I'm seeing a recurring theme here in most of these series is that teams might get off to the strong start. I'm going to get to one of those series in particular here in a few minutes where there was a team that got off to like a super charged strong start and wound up having a complete collapse that I don't know if I've seen before in an NBA playoff game. We'll get to that here in a few minutes, but I'm seeing a theme here is that teams, the good teams like the Heat, the 76ers, and the Warriors find ways in the fourth quarter, and they certainly find ways to take control here of the series. And at the end of the day, to play devil's advocate, I can't necessarily blame you guys for taking the Toronto Raptors or giving them a chance to win the series because Nick Nurse is a very good coach, and Doc Rivers, we know Doc Rivers in the playoffs is very so. I know he's got the one championship way back. I know he's been to the finals all the time, but his track record, especially with those Clippers teams, was very, very suspect to say the least. So I can't fully blame you guys to say the least on that. And the other series I kind of want to get to here that kind of piggybacks off to what I just said was I kind of find this maybe one of the more intriguing series, and that was the Memphis Grizzlies and the Minnesota Timberwolves. It looked like last week the Minnesota Timberwolves were really going to take control of this series. Then we saw game 2, and then, all right, put it in the rearview mirror, right? Then yesterday I'm watching this game, and I messaged Justin because he was actually in our Sportswire radio group kind of active, and Minnesota comes off to like a gangbusters-like start. They had a 20-something point lead early. Memphis comes back, makes it interesting at halftime. I think they got to 7 or 8 points at halftime. And then Minnesota comes and just storms out of the gate in third quarter. And then I look up, and all of a sudden, Memphis early in the fourth quarter gets to single digits. Then all of a sudden, you kind of almost see like Minnesota's legs are just get right under from them. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, Memphis takes the lead midway through the fourth quarter, and I was all she wrote. And I kind of feel like after watching that, guys, it's all she wrote on that series. Justin, I mean, talk to me where we are right now in this series, and especially yesterday's game where at one point Memphis goes on a 42-9 run before a garbage time 3 by Minnesota at the end of the game. But I don't know if I've seen a collapse like that in the postseason. I know you might have one team that you might disagree with that might be in the running, but even that was like, I mean, talk to me about this series and even yesterday's game.
Yeah, I mean, to have a 26-point third quarter lead and find a way to let that slip away is it's just unacceptable. And you could point to a lot of things, but I want to question Chris. I do want to question Chris Finch because
sure.
Why did Karl Anthony Towns only take 4 shots yesterday? Why? I mean, he's your best player. He's a terrific shooter. Why is your best player not involved in the offense? I understand, teams are going to game plan for the opponent's best player, and of course, Taylor Jenkins is going to say, look, if the one guy I'm going to take away is Karl Anthony Towns. But as a guy that size, you should be able to find space throughout the floor and to be as athletic as you are, and to get some open jumpers. But and one of the weird things is how often do you see a team have 2 20-point leads in a game and fail to get to 100?
I know.
Minnesota only scored 95 points last night, and so it's not like they were world beaters on the scoreboard. Memphis just wasn't scoring early. Their shooting got going.
At 39 in the first quarter, if I recall correctly. Minnesota, I think at 39, was 39-21 after one, right, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. And they ended up with 95. So think about that. They scored just less than 60 for the final 3 quarters, which is less than 20 per quarter. So, I mean, Chris Finch has to go back to the drawing board, and he's got to figure out a different plan because not having Karl Anthony Towns involved. And look, I understand D'Angelo Russell had 21 shots last night, but D'Angelo Russell is going to be a guy who's going to be his own shot creator at times.
Very streaky. We know that from the Nets. He's very streaky. Very streaky.
Absolutely. He's one of those shoot first type point guards. And look, that's all well and good because he's a very good shooter. But at the same time, 21 shots, you still got to be able to get some shots for Karl Anthony Towns. You got to work the paint a little bit, work inside out, and get him more involved in the game. And I mean, I know he's been dealing with foul trouble this entire series. That's really hampered his minutes as well. But I mean, I find that to be the most number one inexcusable thing, and at least get Memphis into foul trouble by putting Towns on the line. Towns is a terrific shooter. So I think coaching and game plan just all terrible.
Oh, it certainly wasn't, to quote Charles Barkley. That was terrible. And speaking of those who've jumped in here before I get to the Ruthless, Brad Weiss, of course. Do we call? I forgot. Listen, Brad, is he the strong force, the super force? What do we refer to Mr. Weiss at this point? I feel like I've lost count on.
He's the super force.
All right, good. All right, want to make sure because obviously we want to make sure that Mr. Weiss is a happy man because he's actually the better athlete in the family because, well, he was a professional athlete. You were a very successful college athlete, but we'll see if you become a professional coach in a second. But I want to read off his comment, and he says, "Not so fast." In the words of Lee Corso, "Not so fast, my friend. Hawks down only 3, close game." All right, fair enough. So maybe I take back some of those things in the Hawks. And he says, "Minnesota dumbest team." Yeah, I mean, listen, Brad. Help me out on this because you were a very successful player. You were a very good player. I mean, we talked about how it happened, right? But walk me now through going into the next game, right? You're a Timberwolves player. You're in that locker room, right? You blew this big lead, but it's still 2-1. I mean, how do you find a way to kind of put that past you? And, Justin and I spoke about it yesterday in our group, and it was like, all right, this series is over, right? But you're wearing that Wolves jersey. You're in that locker room. Walk me through how you could put that past you and find a way to win to win. Because if you win game 4, right, it's 2-2. It's still now it's a best of 3. You still could steal the series. So walk me through how you could put this past you in the rear view mirror and find a way here to win and change the outlook here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say this: when you have a guy like Patrick Beverley in your locker room, I think you'll be okay with getting to the next game because that type of attitude and the way that he goes about things. He's pretty demanding on players and also obviously a little bit of a nut job in the same time.
Like we don't know any of those.
But listen, that's a guy that I think will take charge in the leadership aspect and make sure the guys are ready for the following game. But I really want to go on and address the Minnesota Timberwolves first, and then I'll get to the Memphis Grizzlies in a second.
Sure.
When we talk about my dad stating that they're the dumbest team, this is why I'm going to say it, okay? If anybody was listening to TNT yesterday and listening to Charles Barkley, okay, he called Minnesota extremely dumb and stupid on multiple occasions. And the sad thing was, even at halftime, he kind of knew that they were going to be dumb and probably end up losing the game, even though he had picked them at the beginning of the game. Now, it takes something. It takes something to really lose two. The first one in the first half was a 26-point lead, and then in the second half, it was a 25-point lead. And now, when we talk about basketball, specifically in the NBA, there's 2 really important quarters, the second and the fourth. All right, because obviously, the second period is important because after the first, you're getting readjusted in the second, and then obviously the fourth period because it's the last one. And the Minnesota Timberwolves scored 12 points in each of those quarters, where they had success in the first and third. Now, this is where I get upset. As a player, looking at Minnesota play, they're highly dependent on making tough shots. I don't know what their offense is.
They live and die by the 3, by the way. They live and die.
They do and die by the 3. They're all over the place. They're on the floor constantly. Like Justin said, they don't get Karl-Anthony Towns the ball. The other issue is, though, Karl-Anthony Towns can't be on the court because he's committing fouls left and right. And he's also playing stupid at times. So it's his own fault as well. So this team, again, they're young, but they're also dumb. And Justin talks about Chris Finch. I mean, listen, as a coach, one of the most important things in basketball is momentum. And when the Memphis Grizzlies had momentum on multiple occasions, Chris Finch just let it go. He didn't call timeout. Like there was, I believe, a 21-0 run, and Chris Finch did not call timeout.
Yeah, you were kind of waiting for that. I was watching the game, and
that.
Look, they give you 7 timeouts. Use them,
and you get media timeouts too. So to me, that's just inexcusable. I mean, the fact that he didn't call a timeout, the fact that he didn't stop Memphis's momentum, knowing
we'll get to coaches not taking timeouts later.
Oh, yeah. But listen, we're talking, and to all these points, we're talking about inexperienced coaches, all right, that again are learning on the fly. And the one thing that I would question with Chris Finch is, like you said, not taking timeouts, not doing a good job in 2 quarters where the team basically looked like they couldn't score. No adjustments were made. Then Memphis on top of that, and let me get to Memphis now. Listen, they fought hard. They had their tough times offensively, but you kind of knew that they were still getting good shots. They weren't making shots at times, but they were getting good shots. And that resulted in a guy like Desmond Bane having a big game. He ended up making them. He ended up coming up clutch. Ja Morant, obviously not his best game. Still found a way to get his teammates open shots, though. Their defense.
Triple-double.
Yeah. I mean, again, that says it right there.
Brandon Clark at 20 points. 20 points, 8 rebounds for Brandon Clark.
I mean, you go down the list. They got contributions from many people. And again, when you look at Memphis, you kind of saw, like I said, an offense, something controlled, getting good shots, making the right plays. It just wasn't falling for them. And Memphis and Minnesota, like I said, when they're hot and they're making these tough shots and getting out in transition, they look like a great team. When they're not getting in transition, when they're playing half-court offense, they don't look as good, especially when they're not on their game. Then you see frustration. You see fights on the bench. You see different things like that. And this is a team, again, that's young. And like I said, and I can't disagree with Charles Barkley, they look dumb, dumber, and stupid out there at times. And it's just bad. And again, they have a lot of talent, but they also have a lot, and I say a lot, of learning to do, especially in the playoffs.
They certainly do here, and I do want to get an update here, and thanks to the Crack staff for giving us here. And building off here what Mr. Weiss had to say, we've got the Hawks now up by 2 with 1:41 left. So if you were listening to us like 15 minutes ago, maybe you have to basically forget that existed. It's almost like when you go back to the tape, and if Miami doesn't win this game, you go, well, forget about what I just said here. And it looks like Trae Young had tied it up originally to get to 104 there. So obviously that's going back and forth. So you might want to stay tuned. We'll definitely update that here as we go on throughout the evening. As now Atlanta is up by 3. Now I check here with 1:41 left. So obviously, thanks to the Crack staff for giving it to us here as we are here on Sportswire Radio, speaking all things related here to the world of professional sports, plus all the latest from you and anything else. And I'm with 2 of my guys at Sportswire Radio. There's, of course, Mr. Justin Gianelli, who is not shaving until the Brooklyn Nets win. So we'll see. Hopefully then maybe he gets the razor blade out, 10 o'clock, maybe 10:05, whatever time the game ends, and he gets to the bathroom and does the shave. And so we'll see about that. He also does a great job with the baseball banter show, which you can hear pretty much throughout sportnarium.com throughout the week. And, of course, the brute force Brad Weiss, I guess now a St. Joseph's, New York alum. It's going to take us a while, Brad, to get used to repeating that, but we'll figure that out. Also, of course, he is the head coach for our Plainview JFK Hawks boys JV team, also a coach with the Level Up basketball organization, the Long Island Nets he's a member of, and the LI Brew Crew. Of course, the Brew Crew should be back on the field this Sunday, and much, much more here is a part of. And I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sportswire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And if you like what you hear from us on Sportswire Radio, you can like us anytime on Sportswire Radio at Facebook, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. I want to thank again Desmond Johnson with Tobacco Road Sports Radio. You can catch us there tomorrow afternoon. I think there's a baseball game in North Carolina that will be coming in afterwards. So figure between 2:30 and 3:30, and we'll be on tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. They're on like 8 a.m., like 980, I think it is one of the dials out there that we're on. But for those outside North Carolina, you can catch us at tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. Thank you, Desmond, as always. Also, we are now live on Roku with Linda and Mac McGrath's Northeast Streaming Sports Channel. Make sure you give them a follow on Facebook. I think we're up to like 4,000 people that are following that. So good job, everybody, for doing that. And we are talking all things related here to the world of sports. And thanks to the Crack staff, because we're updating as we go here. It's the Hawks up 2 now, 109, 107, 122 left here in the fourth quarter. So it's certainly going to be a doozy here. Trae Young looks like he's getting hot. So maybe Jimmy Cronin knew something that we didn't know. But again, stay tuned. A lot of basketball left here, to say the least. And I want to get to another series. I'm going to get to the Nets. I want to save the Nets for last because I really want to build up to that. But I want to get to another series that, again, I'm kind of perplexed at what's going on here. And that's the Phoenix Suns and the New Orleans Pelicans, which we're going to see, I believe, right after this game, or it's on, I think, on ESPN2. If I'm
it just tipped off about 15 minutes ago.
Okay.
During the first quarter.
That just tipped up, and we'll give updates here throughout the next hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever we're on here. But I want to go over to this series here because the brute force Brad Weiss was like, listen, it doesn't matter if it's the Clippers or the Pelicans. They're all going to get swept, right? And certainly after game one, watching Sunday, I mean, I was kind of like half asleep through the first game. I was trying to like work myself to stay motivated, and it obviously didn't matter, right? But then game two, all of a sudden, New Orleans, I think, pretty much was in firm control for most of that game. And for the Phoenix Suns, it looks like they might be without a really, really big piece. And I'll get to Justin in a second. But the brute force, I mean, have you gone back to the tape and listened back to some of what you had to say? I know I've played it on Instagram, and people, I'm sure, have definitely listened to it. I think like 200 people viewed it on my impressions I saw, because we're able to check the impressions. And And now, what do you think about this series? Because I got to be honest with you, I give the New Orleans Pelicans a real puncher's chance here, despite everything you might have said that they can really make this a series. I don't know yet if they're going to win it. I can't go that far, but they're definitely in this series. So walk me through what you're thinking right now.
Yeah, well, listen, to answer your first question, no, I did not go back and listen to it. And listen, the one thing you guys can hear as an athlete, when you like say some really egregious things, or when you have like a really,
I've said plenty. I got in trouble with the wrestler today. So
yeah, but when you have like as a player, when you have like a really bad game, it's hard for you to go back and watch it sometimes. And this is one of those things where last week I had a bad predicting week because it's not looking good right now. So listen, first of all, the Pelicans did not get swept because they won a game. But listen, did I go into last week thinking that Devin Booker was going to get hurt? No. So that obviously played a key factor. But even without Devin Booker, I'll be honest with you, I thought the Suns were still going to win. But the Pelicans proved me wrong. The Pelicans definitely went out in that game too, and they played really well. And Brandon Ingram couldn't miss. A guy like Jose Alvarado is playing hard for that team, making plays. Even without Zion Williamson, other guys have stepped up and made plays. Jonas Valanciunas, amongst others. So listen, the Pelicans are a team that I think are going to make this series very competitive. And I actually think I'm going to say this, Tom Bryce. I'm going to go from last week saying that they were going to get swept right now. I think the Pelicans have a chance to win this series. I really do. And it's all, guess who it's going to fall on, whose shoulders? It's going to fall on a former player in New Orleans who I said has the most pressure on him of any player. And that pressure just went significantly higher in Chris Paul. It's going to be on him. It really is. He's going to have to really step up, be that best player on that team, not only facilitating and doing everything that he normally does, but now he's going to have to be a big-time scorer as well. Yes, he's had big games, but he has to do it every game for this team. They're going to get contributions from other guys like Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder. They're going to get other contributions, but all those guys are role players. Chris Paul is not just a role player. He now is the best player. He has to come up clutch. He's going to have the ball in his hands. These games are going to be close because, again, it's a little more even now without Devin Booker. So it's going to be on him to make those shots, and we'll see if he ultimately does it. And if he doesn't, that's going to be a tough ending, really, for Chris Paul because, again, I thought this year was his best chance, and I still think it's his best chance. Even without Devin Booker, I think he needs to win this series, and this is really his time right now to step up, win this series, and hopefully for the Suns' sake, Devin Booker is able to come back after this series, but they got to get it done against the Pelicans, who are no joke. I mean, even though they're a joke when it comes to their record, because they shouldn't have been in the playoffs with their damn record. In fact, and again, I knew this, but somebody brought it up to me. Somebody said the New York Knicks had a better record than the Pelicans. I'm like, yeah, they did. But in the end, they're not in the playoffs, and the Pelicans are. So, listen, in the end, the Pelicans are a respectable opponent. They're playing good basketball, but Phoenix is the 1 seed. Even without the Booker, they have to find a way to win, and Chris Paul has to get it done.
Listen, you never know at this point because now the series is completely changed, and that's going to be an environment here. And thanks to the crack staff for giving us this update here. The Atlanta Hawks, listen, we all have to eat crow here because the Atlanta Hawks have defeated the Miami Heat. That is a series. Forget about what we just said in that series because now it's 2-1, and James Cronin, I'm sure now he's going to come on here, and he's a genius. He's never going to leave Rico's now. He's never leaving there now, probably. If he's still at Rico's, I hope that he gave Rico's a nice tip. That's all I'll say. I certainly hope that he definitely paid them and treated them well, but obviously Hawks get it done here. Trae Young had, 22 points? I'm looking at it here, and they find a way, and now that's a new series, and so again, we don't know anything, so obviously forget what we know, and obviously that is a totally different series, but Justin, sometimes I feel like in these series, it almost in a sense, and I'm going back to football. We'll get into football a little bit, but it almost reminds me here, this series between the Pelicans and the Suns, in a way, it almost reminds me of the year the Seattle Seahawks were 7-9, made the postseason, won a game, played against the Saints, and everybody all of a sudden kind of wrote the Seahawks off, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of momentum here with the Pelicans. Now, I don't know if they're going to win this series. I don't know. Obviously, you're going to find out a lot here over this weekend about this series. But, I mean, maybe we kind of slept on the Pelicans because you know what? They had a tough run in here. They started the year 1-12, went through a lot of adversity, had a head coach here, and Willie Green. He knows Monty Williams, right? They have a very, very special relationship. Maybe sometimes that might also play into account here, but something tells me here sometimes they call it a wave or the wind is kind of at your backs. And again, it might be early, but maybe the New Orleans Pelicans, we didn't give them as much as a chance as maybe we should have. I don't know. Walk me through your thoughts on this series and where we are right now.
No, I think we fairly described their chances in this series. The series has changed because Devin Booker has gotten hurt. That's a significant loss.
Okay.
And, now you're taking 20 to 25 shots and you're handing it to somebody else. So, can those said scorers become as efficient as Devin Booker? The answer is no. You're not replacing a Devin Booker. Like Brad said, now Cam Johnson has to step up. Mikal Bridges has to step up even more. And yes, the pressure is squarely on Chris Paul. And we've seen Chris Paul fail in the biggest moments. Now, do I still think the Phoenix will get out of the series? I do. Do I think it's possible we could be looking up at the end of tonight and New Orleans up 2-1? I certainly do. But it will need to be another big night for both Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. And nobody's talking about how big CJ McCollum has been for the New Orleans Pelicans. Ever since that trade from the Portland Trailblazers, that's really where New Orleans started to get it going. They started to pick their game up a little bit. And we've seen what CJ McCollum is as the best player on the team. He was always second fiddle to Damian Lillard for all those years in Portland. Now he's teamed up with Brandon Ingram in New Orleans, and they've been terrific together. And you saw that the other night, combining for 60 points in game 2. Ingram was 13 of 21, and McCollum, while he was 7 of 18, he was 6 of 10 from 3. So when you got CJ McCollum hitting 6 threes, it just puts a lot of added pressure on the opponent. So, but obviously the series has totally changed without Devin Booker, and we're looking at, we're looking at an unknown timeline with Devin Booker. They're saying 2 to 3 weeks. So that's putting the second round in jeopardy. And guess what? You're going to be facing a much better opponent in the second round. And, like I said, I still think Phoenix gets out of this series, but it might be a 6 or 7 game that's going to take a lot out of them too. And now whoever they face probably will be the Utah-Dallas series. You're looking at a tough matchup.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't want any part of either one of those teams, in either Dallas or Utah, especially without Devin Booker. No question right now that the Phoenix Suns are definitely in doo-doo. And listen, they always say until the home team loses the first game on their court, it becomes a series. And listen, New Orleans stole a game. So listen, right now, pressure is definitely on Phoenix to at least get one of these.
Pelicans have home court advantage right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, to me, right now, Phoenix has got to get at least one of these 2 games. If they don't get one of these 2 games, and certainly like the Brute Force said, I could not agree with you more on this one, Brad. Chris Paul is definitely, the pressure's on him because we're going to look at his career differently, to say the least. If he doesn't walk away with another championship or a finals appearance at the least, we're going to certainly look at his career and say, you know what? I don't know here. So obviously we'll find out here. We'll definitely have updates here, I'm sure, throughout the time while we're on the air, as long as this game is going. And the series we just talked about here, Dallas and Utah. And again, I was watching that series and I was almost expecting Utah to win yesterday, and just Dallas just found ways. And one of those players for me that I really kept an eye on, maybe because it was local and I always enjoyed watching him, was Spencer Dinwiddie. So the Brute Force, I'm sure Brendan Fitzpatrick right now is in his glory. He's certainly putting on his Mavericks cap and celebrating. But walk me through right now. It's 2-1 Dallas over Utah. Obviously, Dallas has bounced back nicely, and they've got the advantage right now. And you got to give them a lot of credit. And walk me through where we are right now in this series.
Yeah, so let me first say this before I get to this. So, and I knew it was coming. James Cronin texted me as soon as the game was over.
What he said? What he said?
He just said, "Ice tray, game winner, stop playing with me." That's what he said. And I can just tell from his reaction he was probably going nuts. So good for him. He'll probably be at Rico's now on Sunday with his Trae Young jersey too. Because good luck. So good for you, James Cronin. Whatever. Either way. But let me get to another good friend of mine named Brendan Fitzpatrick, who has also been texting me every game that the Dallas Mavericks have won. Basically stating Mavs in 5. He's every game Mavs in 5, Mavs in 5.
Yeah, I could see him saying that. Even I could actually hear him say that.
Yeah, he's feeling real confident right now about his Mavericks. And you know what? To be quite honest with you, Tom Bryce, he should feel confident about his Mavericks. I mean, because of the way that they're playing. But this is not. Listen, and respectedly so, the Mavericks have played well. I'm going to get to them, but I cannot start with the Mavericks here because this is not about the Mavericks. This is about the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz right now are a tragic embarrassment right now to basketball. All right, because this team and I was listening to Kendrick Perkins on ESPN this morning, and he basically stated that there's an analogy that there's Netflix and chill. That's like an analogy that people have, Netflix and chill. He said the Utah Jazz, it should be regular season and chill because they chill in the playoffs. I mean, this is what this team continues to do. I mean, and they're doing it once again. I mean, this is this is a team that last year lost to the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard.
Yep.
And now this year is losing a series without Luka Doncic playing in any of these games so far. And not only that, they're making Jalen Brunson look like the next coming of Michael Jordan or something like that on the Mavericks. I mean, this guy's dropping 41, 31, killing them, shooting the ball really well, getting in the paint. I mean,
he had 30, 31 last night or something like that.
31 points for Jalen Brunson last night.
He's a very nice player, but he's not a guy that you should be allowing 41 and 31 in 2 straight games and losing to him. They're losing to Jalen Brunson. They're losing to Dorian Finney-Smith. They're losing to, and again, Spencer Dinwiddie has played well, but he hasn't been their best player. It's been Jalen Brunson who's been their best player. Kleber too. And listen, to Jazz fans, a lot of them and a lot of people in the Jazz, media world are talking about how Gobert is having trouble because he can't guard guys on the perimeter like Kleber, who shoot out from the perimeter. He's having trouble. And ultimately, listen, it's a couple different things. One, it's pretty obvious that Mitchell and Gobert, they're not like a perfect match. They have their issues, and it just doesn't look good. Their role players for Utah are just not playing good enough.
Excellent point. Because Dallas, to me, I look up and down their roster. They had, 7 guys yesterday in double digits? 8 guys, maybe? Something
Yeah,
like
the Mavericks, listen, that's without another key player in Tim Hardaway Jr. as well, who's been one of their scorers all season long. So, you're talking about 2 big scorers for the Mavericks, and they're still getting it done. Where, the Jazz are coming up small. They're not getting the job done. People are talking about how Donovan Mitchell might start having 1 foot out the door already, which, makes me smile, obviously, because we all know if his foot is out the door, we all know where he wants to go. I just pray, I pray, I'll do my prayer right now, that the Utah Jazz want Julius Randle. They want Julius Randle.
Remember, his father works for this organization, so he likes the blue and orange.
I knew that was coming.
Listen, you know what? That would obviously be a dream come true if Donovan Mitchell became a New York Knick. Which, people are saying, the way that he looks, he's kind of nonchalant. He's kind of doesn't look as excited to be playing for Utah. It could potentially happen. It just is a matter of whether or not the Knicks can pull it off with the pieces that they have, as we've talked about with Donald, where, we don't know if we could ever get enough pieces to make a trade like that. But ultimately, Utah, I just can't believe that they're always so great in the regular season. And then whatever matchup they have in the playoffs, and luckily for them, they've come into the playoffs with matchups that are pretty favorable for them. And they still can't come through. So in the end, I just can't be more disappointed in Utah. And to give Brendan Fitzpatrick his flowers and his love, because he texts me every damn time they win. All right, Jalen Brunson's playing great. The Mavericks are playing good. And Luka Doncic should be back next game. So it's exciting times for the Mavericks.
You know what? I think you make an excellent point in the fact that Donovan Mitchell is arguably one of the 10 to 15 best players in the NBA, right? And he's got top 10, right? And he's got very limited postseason success. And we just spoke about Chris Paul, but now you look at Donovan Mitchell and you start saying to yourself, well, I mean, maybe the pressure is all on the Utah Jazz because the Dallas Mavericks, they're playing with house money right now, right? So right now they're up 2-1. They got a game on the road. They've got home court advantage. So, I mean, pressure is all on Utah here to at least win because I feel like if Utah does not win in this series in Game 4, going into Dallas, it very might well be all she wrote for them. So, I mean, pressure is all on them. And another team, and again, we're going to get to the Nets, but I got one more series I got to talk about here, and that leaves us.
By the way, though, one thing on this Utah-Dallas series.
Talk to me.
When are we going to start talking about Quinn Snyder's job security? At what point do we start talking about his job security? Because at what point does it fall on him that they keep failing in the playoffs every year? I mean,
Good point.
If
I know Utah is not used to firing coaches because they're kind of.
Remember Jerry Sloan was there for all these years, and if I'm not mistaken, Quinn Snyder's the immediate replacement, so he's been there ever since.
10 years, right? It's just
yeah. So look. At some point, when do we? There's another coach in this playoffs that I believe is the worst coach. We're getting
to him. Like I said, one more series.
But if this man's not the worst, Quinn Snyder's the worst coach in the NBA playoffs right now, and at what point? Is his job on the line?
It's an interesting point. I mean, I kind of almost feel like, guys, Utah is like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NBA. They just don't change coaches. What have they had, like 4 coaches in their history or something like that? I mean, so it's, I don't necessarily know if they will make the move, but obviously you make a fair point because eventually you have to win in the postseason, right? You win all these 50-plus win years left and right, and with Jerry Sloan, who unfortunately passed away here, not too long ago, 2 years ago, coming up around that time. I mean, they at least got to the conference finals and the finals, but obviously now, Utah hasn't even had much of that success with Quinn Snyder. They've had, again, one of the top 10 best players in the league.
And it's very talented roster. One of the more dominant big men.
And the West really isn't what
the
it used to be
rim protector, Rudy Gobert.
And the Western Conference is not what it was 5 to 6 years ago. I mean, so there really is no excuse. I mean, touche there, Justin, for sure, to say the least.
If you think about it, the Western Conference was significantly weaker this year. I mean, look at the Pelicans; they were the 9 seed, 36 and 46. I mean, the 9 and the 10, the Atlanta Hawks and the Charlotte Hornets were 43 and 39 this year, which means all 10 teams in the Eastern Conference that made the postseason finished with an above high. Or the play-in.
And we looked at the Hawks,
500.
And the Hawks we looked at, who got off to a miserable start, if I recall correctly.
Very slow, and we didn't think they would make the playoffs at all.
I'm glad you brought that up because I remember going on here. I think we were on a stream maybe in January when the Knicks were 22 and 21, and the Hawks, if I'm not mistaken, were like 4 or 5 games behind them, and it didn't look like the Hawks were going anywhere. And
on the opposite spectrum, I mean, I was the one who said pump the brakes on it, but we had the discussion on here was how legit were the Washington Wizards, and look at them fall apart.
Yeah,
so it worked in opposite ends too.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird.
Cleveland falling down the standings, but they were still able to get to the play-in.
Well, I think they built up kind of like the team we're going to get to next to Chicago Bulls. They built up enough of a capital that they were able to.
Yeah, and the Bulls were at the top of the Eastern Conference all season, and then they end up in the 6th spot.
Yeah, the Bulls
now they're getting completely dominated by the Bucks.
They were 39 and 21, if I'm not mistaken. The Bulls, those are Chicago Bulls. So obviously, those are some of the other things. And speaking of that, here, obviously, those Chicago Bulls here who are playing the Milwaukee Bucks and. Obviously, again, certainly an interesting series. I look at it now, and boy,
no Chris Middleton either.
The Milwaukee Bucks. If you were doubting the Milwaukee Bucks going into tonight, you ain't doubting them because I think Justin, the way this series is going to go here, something tells me as the brute force is back with technical difficulties.
Here we go. Here's a good synopsis. First 36 games that they just showed on ESPN, 26 and 10. And then since then, they were 20. They started the season 26 and 10,
20 and 26 after that, right?
Yep, 20 and 26 since.
Yeah,
so that's a good stat that ESPN just threw up.
So if you did the law of logics, that tells you Chicago Bulls would not have been a playoff team in the Eastern Conference based off that.
No, and you know what? The Lonzo Ball injury had a lot to do with it, and it kind of changed the dynamic of their team. I mean, yes, the reason why they got to the postseason still was the heroics of DeMar DeRozan. I mean, he had an MVP caliber season himself. So, but they're overmatched in this series, and even without Chris Middleton, who's going to miss multiple weeks himself, and that puts with the Milwaukee Bucks in the 3 seed, that puts them in serious trouble with whoever they face in the second round.
So we look at this series then, Bucks and Bulls. Bucks have a huge lead here, and I hate going on a limb because obviously we said that with the Hawks and Heat, but you feel
we could say this game's over. I wouldn't quite call the series over yet. I'd like to see because I like Billy Donovan a lot as a head coach.
And they still have DeRozan, they still have.
I think he'll make a lot of adjustments, and look, now we've seen the Milwaukee Bucks without Chris Middleton. Then it'll be up to Billy Donovan to make necessary adjustments for Game 4, and just take it tonight and just be like, all right, tonight was a wash. We played horrendous tonight, and let's get back out there tomorrow and let's see what we could do and get ready for Game 4 in a couple of days.
I mean, we're looking at what 103-71 right now. This is as bad a performance you could have. I mean,
it's wiping. They wiped the floor with them.
Listen, 71 points in the modern NBA. I mean, this is certainly one for the ages here, which brings me back to the Brute Force, Brad Weiss, and the Brute Force. We were speaking about the Bucks and the Bulls, and Justin's giving us an update here. We were kind of riffing off it a little bit. I mean, obviously Milwaukee's going to win this game here, and I guess in a sense it's similar to maybe in a way Memphis and Minnesota's series. But walk me through then where we are, and let's say if you are the Bulls, because you are still having one game here on your home court, and you pretty much got to win this game. I mean, I know you got to win in Milwaukee on the road, and you hung on for dear life after almost blowing a big lead. And we'll get to the other team that's left here still, and obviously I'm kind of salivating for that in some crazy way or another. But walk me through then with the Bulls. Can they come back in this series, and what do you think they need to do?
So I'll answer the first question directly. Do I think the Bulls can come back in this series? Yeah, I think they can. Okay. And listen, the reason why I'm going to say that is because the first 2 games, I mean, the Bulls were very resilient. They were very resilient. They made life very difficult for Milwaukee at times. Milwaukee struggled to score in intervals. Both games, obviously, the first game they lost. The Bulls lost. But ultimately, they were right there, especially at the end of the game. And then the second game, they came through. And obviously, DeMar DeRozan played well. Other role players played well. And their defense was very solid. Now, tonight, just like Justin said, tonight is a wash. They just didn't come to play. They didn't play well. And it's funny, too, that Grayson Allen is right now the leading scorer for Milwaukee. For those who forgot, Grayson Allen is the same guy who had Alex Caruso out for almost half the season because of that big foul that he had that messed up Caruso. So
that was a big loss for them too. He's a good player.
Yeah, and Grayson Allen, they're both back now, but Grayson Allen goes back to Chicago. He's getting booed and probably cursed at.
Yeah, and that Chicago crowd, I could only imagine in Chicago.
Yes.
I could only
imagine. And he's having a good game. So it's a great sign for Milwaukee because, Milwaukee, right, especially without Chris Middleton, like Justin said, it's going to come to guys like Grayson Allen and obviously Drew Holiday and, other players off the bench. Bobby Portis is back. So,
Portis with a monster night, 18 points, 16 rebounds, just a monster night on the board.
And he's listening. That was a big loss for them last game when he was out of that game. And I think that also was the key for them losing to Game 2. But the fact that he's back, he's a huge piece for that Milwaukee team. As much as I, joke around and call him Bubby from his days with the Knicks, he's gotten significantly better since those days.
And I'll tell you what Milwaukee did tonight, which is going to be very important for them. You look at their starting lineup, guys, they got rested. They played, 29, 25, 30 minutes. So you know what? They didn't have to play their guys 38 to 40 minutes. So going into the fourth game, they got some rest. That does mean something. This is a league where that stuff kind of really means something. So I think that's also going to bode well for Milwaukee, I think.
And Game 4 is on Sunday. So not we've seen some series with the 2 days off in between games. This is just
I hate that. I know you
This is
spoke
the
about
one day.
I
I
hate
know.
these
It's
like
very
3
spaced
days
out.
off. What is this? Like 3 days, 4 days? Let's play next week while we're at it. I was
Yeah,
here
I know.
to talk about this last night on the Fan. I couldn't agree more with him and you, Justin, a few days ago.
It's
What's with these
spaced
series?
out. I don't know. I don't under now.
I mean,
I get it. If there's some permit issues in terms of not being able to have the arena for the night because of maybe a concert or another sporting event, that's all possible. Like we know the Raptors. They share with the Maple Leafs.
I remember when
and
the
that.
Islanders and the Nets shared the Barclays Center. It was
Right.
always like you get some
Right.
weird
the Bulls share with the Blackhawks.
Blackhawks.
So
the Bruins and the Celtics. Yeah.
Exactly. But they space it out the way they want, and whatever. But I mean, look, I do expect the Bulls to bounce back, but I mean, you look at what Milwaukee has on as depth. I mean, it's just pretty it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, they're just a well balanced team.
And it's a 1:00 game on a Sunday. And thanks to the crack staff for giving us the schedule for tomorrow. So we've got 2:00 76ers and Raptors, 4:30 Mavericks and Jazz, 7:30 the series we'll get to next. That's the Celtics and Nets, and then 10:00 again. Weird time, Minnesota. 10:00 Grizzlies and Timberwolves.
Well, we don't want to talk Warriors Nuggets.
All right, fine. We'll get to that, but we'll and then for the other games we have coming up here, Bucks and Bulls, 1 p.m., 3:30 the aforementioned Warriors and Nuggets. Heat and Hawks, 7:00 on Sunday. I think that's the game I'm probably most excited for. I mean, Suns and Pelicans is the 9:30, so it looks like to me that TNT
and now with some intrigue, and this just came down a couple of minutes ago. Coach Eric Spoelstra saying that Kyle Lowry has to undergo tests to determine severity of a hamstring injury.
Oh boy! Well, you know what?
There's a point guard that could potentially be out. I mean, if he's going for tests, I wouldn't expect him to be ready for Sunday's game. But
game 5 is what, Wednesday? I'm assuming, right? Tuesday, Wednesday?
Tuesday.
All right, so it's all right. Well then, that might, like I said, scratch what we just said about that.
Hawks are very much alive at this point. But
yeah,
I still think Miami pulls it out.
Yeah,
but you know what? Maybe we are looking at something that that could be a longer series.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta won like another game for whatever reason. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if Atlanta got 2 because it's 2-1. But I think I'm
don't say that. I listen. James Cronin won't stop texting me. Let's have this.
Rico's might want that though, because Rico's might want his business. They might want his $20-$30 he's dropping on beats.
I mean,
tough economy. You need business. I mean, what can I tell you?
Hey, he's just got to stop it. So if you're listening, James, stop texting me. I'm Trey Young every other second, all right?
Well,
Please.
Listen, tell him to get his butt on the stream and talk instead of him texting you. Or like these guys, they're texting you, like Brendan Fitzpatrick and James Cronin. Tell them they're not doing anything clearly on a Friday night. They can clearly be listening to us. There are plenty of people I'm looking at here on the screen that are listening. They could certainly join in here, the Brute Force. So you might want to tell those guys to kind of be a man or be a man and just jump on here and talk with us, because we're not going to hurt them. We're going to only comment and riff on them. So obviously that certainly is some of those things that I have in my mind. But since Justin brought it up, there is one other series that we could get to, and that is the Golden State Warriors and the Denver Nuggets. And I've watched all 3 games of this series, and I felt like yesterday was the game Denver really had to have, because I still believed in Denver for whatever reason. But I think it's more to me, and I could say Klay Thompson, I could go on with Steph Curry, but for whatever reason, the guy that I'm noticing here is Draymond Green. And I think the stat I heard was Draymond Green is averaging something like almost 10 assists per game in this series right now. And I know it doesn't show up in the points and rebounds, but I think the one player for me, and I know Jordan Poole we could certainly mention as well, Justin. But
I've loved what Jordan Poole. I mean, he has arguably been the best player on the Warriors. And remember, you have Steph Curry coming off the bench because they've managed his minutes a little bit. I mean, he did play 31 minutes last night, but
yep.
I mean, you've gone your starting 5 has been Draymond, Andrew Wiggins.
But Draymond Green for me, I mean, I look up and this is like the intangible player.
Absolutely.
This is the guy I'm looking at the series right now, why it's 3-0, and I really think it's Draymond Green. I mean, I really think it's time to get the brooms out in that series.
it's tough to say a team with Nikola Jokic is going to go out that quietly. But, like I said, last week in the chat, right as the playoffs were starting and all that, they were going to miss Jamal Murray. They really were.
Absolutely.
And some of the injuries that Denver suffered, not having Michael Porter Jr. for a chunk of the year either. He's not here again still. But, it's kind of hard when you're facing a team with all this championship experience that the Golden State Warriors do. I mean, they still
had away in that fourth quarter. It was like they were like neck and neck, and
right.
That was kind of where I almost felt like, Justin, the Warriors' experience.
But that's where coaching and experience takes over. And no disrespect to Michael Malone. I'm a big Michael Malone fan. I think he's a terrific coach for the Denver Nuggets. But I mean, you have Steve Kerr there, who's won 3 NBA championships,
and Mike Hill and look
at all the NBA championships he won as a player between the Chicago Bulls and the San Antonio Spurs.
I want to count on how many rings he has.
I think he's up to. I want to say he's up to 10 total. Steve Kerr.
I think he won 3 with the Bulls, 3 with the Spurs, and what did he win? 4 with Golden State. They've
won 3 championships. I mean, he's got 9. Fine. But still, think about the
9 and 2 finals.
But still, think about the championship pedigree that Steve Kerr not only brought as a player, but now brings as a head coach, and he's just ahead of everybody. And again, no disrespect to Michael Malone, but you have that championship edge, and your core is still there. Draymond Green, Klay Thompson is healthy and shooting the lights out of the ball, and Steph Curry.
Well, Klay Thompson has looked really good the last couple.
Yeah, I mean,
he's become the Klay Thompson we saw.
Look, he's been gone for 2 years, so it's taken plenty of time for him to shake off that rust of missing 2+ years. But now you're seeing why Klay Thompson is one of the greatest shooters of all time. I mean, you have one of the greatest shooting duos of all time in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And you've been bringing Curry off the bench for all 3 games. So, I mean, the Warriors are just lethal right now.
I think between Poole, Curry, and Thompson last night, it was something like 80 points or something close to that number. I mean, that's like the depth you got. Like we were talking about this, Justin, in the group before we get to the brute force Brad Weiss. It's almost you got that third option now. I mean, that's what makes them so dangerous. I mean, I know they had KD for a little bit of that period, but I mean,
Poole and Curry each scored 27 points, and Klay Thompson, who had the most threes, by the way, he was 6 of 13 last night, and he had 26 points. He was 10 of 18 from the field, 6 of 13 from 3. I mean, he was their best 3-point shooter last night. I mean, and you even got 11 points off the bench in 14 minutes from Gary Payton Jr.
Yeah, Gary Payton made some points. Gary Payton the second or junior, whatever you want to call him at this point. I mean, he made some plays here, but the brute force. I mean, I look at this series and I almost want to say it looks like Golden State with everything that's happening in the West, right? Phoenix, we don't know, right? There's a black cloud over them right now. We have Dallas and Utah, and it remains to be seen, right? We spoke about that. And then we've got Memphis and Minnesota, still 2 young teams. Memphis does have Ja Morant, but, I mean, it's almost in a way, and I know it's still early, but the stars, are they aligning for the Golden State Warriors maybe to get back on the throne here and maybe get to that deep run and back to the finals where we're used to see them through the middle of the last decade? Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Brad?
Yeah, another pick gone wrong for me because I hate to say it. Justin's right. Yeah, I think it is. I think that everything has now paved its path for the Golden State Warriors to be the representatives out of the West. I mean, with the Devin Booker injury, obviously in Phoenix, I think Memphis. I still like Memphis to get there, but I think to Justin's point, I mean, championship pedigree, the players that the Golden State Warriors have. It's going to be very difficult for a young Memphis Grizzlies team to overcome that experience that is the Golden State Warriors with all those great players. So, and listen, you guys mentioned it, and I just have to continue to emphasize it. Sure. I mean, the fact that Jordan Poole is playing at this high of a level is really unbelievable. I mean, it speaks volumes to the Golden State developmental staff and their coaching staff. I mean, this is a kid, right, who was a late first-round pick, right? We all thought he was going to be a solid player. But look at him now. I mean, he's not just a solid player. He's a very good
late first-round picks, to your point, generally aren't what Jordan Poole is doing right now.
No, Jordan Poole is an elite basketball player. On many other teams would be, a regular starter. Obviously, he's starting for the Warriors right now. But Steph Curry's coming off the bench, which is a whole other topic. But listen, Jordan Poole has been unbelievable. I mean, this kid's scoring. He's long. He's active. He's a leader. You can just tell based on his work ethic and how his teammates talk about him. He's a young, hungry player. And listen, I'll say this. I mean, if you're listening to me from the New York Knicks, I mean, these are the type of players that we should be drafting. Like, these are the players that we need to develop and draft. But no, we don't do that. So the Warriors do that. They always find a way. They always get these late first-round picks. They do a great job with them. And Jordan Poole has been nothing but unbelievable, and he's the key to why the Warriors are having the success that they're having. Yes, Klay Thompson is doing his thing. Yes, Steph Curry is doing his thing. Draymond Green is even hitting three-pointers.
Well, Draymond Green, to me, I just feel like he's the intangible guy. I just look at him back right now, and I just feel like that's just a totally different dynamic where they kind of remember they had that little stretch for a while, I guess late first half into the early part of the second half, where they kind of not to say the boxing term, they were kind of sleepwalking through the season, but they certainly maybe hit a little bit of a bumpy after that really, really all-worldly start. They definitely kind of leveled off a little bit, but now it just seems like they're peaking at the right time. Even guys like Iguodala are back. And
you're getting the all-important defensive minutes from Andre Iguodala. He's not going to take a bunch of shots, and he get 4 points last night. But in the 16 minutes he's on the court, you're expecting him to shut down the opposing team's best player because he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA.
Absolutely.
And look, that's 4 core members who have won multiple championships with the Golden State Warriors. And it can't be understated that experience could propel them at the very least out of the Western Conference. If not, like I said at the beginning of the postseason, to win it all.
No question about that here. And thanks to the Crack staff for giving us an update here. And Phoenix and New Orleans, 43-43 right now, midway through the second quarter. And for the Suns right now, we're looking
at a tight one.
Yeah. DeAndre Ayton has 15 points right now in 13 minutes. We see Chris Paul, 5 points and 8 assists. JaVale McGee's got 9 points in 5 minutes for the Pelicans right now. CJ McCollum's got 11 points. Devontae Graham's got 11 points. Brandon Ingram's got 9 points. Those are some of the leading scorers there. So, like Justin said, it's going to be definitely a back-and-forth game here, and certainly the Warriors are in firm control in their series. And Anthony Finkel's comment here is, man up, joining the sports report. Yeah, that's for Jimmy Cronin and then Brendan Fitzpatrick. Certainly for them.
Hold on. I got to make one comment on that.
Okay.
All right, because where's my man John Gonzalez today? Because he was.
I actually have a John Gonzalez. Did he message you? Because John Gonzalez, it sounded like he wasn't feeling too well tonight. He messaged me and said, what time you on? And I was like, 9:30. And he said, well, I'm going to try to be on, but I'm not feeling too well. And I was like, I kind of said, well, I hope you feel better. I didn't want to make him feel like he has to come on the chat here. I mean, look, it's just one of those nights here. Billy McInerney was under the weather, and Rob Maraska was out to dinner, and, Chris was obviously out. Sometimes you get that. So, I mean, it just means more time for us to talk at the end of the day. Means,
absolutely. But, listen, I will say this, John Gonzalez, you had the time to post that thing in the Sports Authorities group about me with the whole Julius Randle and the Celtics and the other, whatever the hell the other thing was. So that whole thing you put on the Sports Authorities group, you had time for that. So I hope you feel better.
I got to give you credit on that. That's a good point, because you know what? If you took time to click on your phone and make a Facebook post, you certainly could sit and just watch. It's not like you're speaking. It's not like you're sitting there and you're on the camera. No, I mean, you're commenting. I mean, you know what I'm saying? At least some of these other guys like a Billy McInerney or Rob Maraska, listen, I can't knock them. If one guy's got to go out to dinner with his fiance, I can't knock the guy. You got to do what the lady tells you.
No,
if Billy's not feeling well, I can't knock him. But if John Gonzalez, I mean, look, I love you, John, but I can't really defend you on that.
John, we love you. We just missed your comments, so hope you feel better.
No, you know what? Listen, I'm sure he'll be back. Something tells me he'll be back for sure, because John Gonzalez is obviously a big supporter of ours. We love everything that he does. Of course, Anthony Finkel always supports us, and I want to make sure everybody does a service to Anthony Finkel and follow DPH Property Service and all the great things that they do for us. I mean, I mean, they're everywhere at this point. Not even a consideration. But I want to get to it here. Obviously, it's the series that I've watched every minute of it. Unfortunately, it's a series I have to say I was kind of expecting more here, and that's obviously the Brooklyn Nets and the Boston Celtics. And I'm going to go with Justin because I'm looking at, for whatever reason, still it's on my desk right now. And that was Thursday's back page of the New York Post. So usually I don't read the paper as much as I used to, but for whatever reason, I had some energy. I went out and I got breakfast, which I usually am not up for breakfast, but I was in this case. And I'm looking at right now, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant's expressions right now. And the word is right now in the Post from Thursday, it was rock stars. And it says, KD, Kyrie come up tiny as Celtics dump Nets into an 0-2 hole. I mean, Justin, give me a positive. Is it possible here before John Gonzalez, all of a sudden the bat signal is lighting up and John Gonzalez has now joined us here. But I mean, I felt like Sunday, after the way the Nets had played to come back down 15, the way Kyrie Irving had played to lose the way they did, it was devastating. But then game 2, the way they blew that lead, and they came up as short as they did in the fourth quarter. But give me a positive. Game 3, the Nets still are 3.5-point favorites last I checked. Can the Brooklyn Nets turn this series around tomorrow night?
I mean, if you want me to give you a positive, I might as well just walk off the show because you know what? There are no positives. That is about as despicable of a 2-game performance as you will find. I don't care that the Nets have only lost 2 games by 8 points. You can't blow that 17-point lead. And guess what? We talked about it before. What is most important in the fourth quarter? Coaching. What do the Nets not have? A good head coach. And guess who's coaching circles around Steve Nash's head? A former assistant, Ime Udoka, who's now the head coach of the Boston Celtics. And guess what? They're a more cohesive unit. You look at the way they play defense between Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart. Defensive Player of the Year, Marcus Smart. Down low with Al Horford and Daniel Tice. Kevin Durant's not being allowed any room. And guess what? Kevin Durant, you're 6'10".
I think that's the worst 2 games I've seen Kevin Durant ever play, by the way. That is the worst 2 games I think I've ever seen Kevin Durant play for a basketball game, period.
Somebody needs to put out a missing persons alert for Kevin Durant because he hasn't showed up at all. At least Kyrie Irving in game 1, yes, he showed up.
No, Kyrie was great. You know what? Kyrie played well in the postseason.
But game 2, he was hot garbage. You cannot be a combined 8 for 30. And yes, okay, Kevin Durant had 27 points. He got to the free throw line a bunch of times. Okay,
yeah,
fine.
We have I can't believe I heard somebody on the Fan last night. This was so people don't watch sports sometimes. The guy actually called up and said, "Well, now that the series is going to the Barclays Center, do you think they could call more fouls on Kevin Durant so he can get to the free throw line more?" I'm like, "Did you watch the game, buddy? In game 2, he was at the free throw line like every other second."
He got to the free throw line. You got to the free throw line a lot. The only thing is they're not calling a lot of the things up top by the perimeter because he's getting hit and harassed at the top of the key, and he's got no room to get for an open shot. But the biggest problem is Kyrie Irving's a better off ball player, and they'd rather have him at the 2, which means who's gonna be the 1? I mean, you've gone with the same starting lineup for the first 2 games of the series, and this has been your most consistent lineup over the recent stretch of Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, Bruce Brown, Kevin Durant.
Bruce Brown had a phenomenal game.
And Bruce Brown was terrific. Don't get me wrong, but two things need to change, and I hate to do this, because Seth Curry also had a terrific game too. But Seth Curry needs to move to the bench for game 3. Goran Dragic needs to start at point guard because they need somebody to come up the court and take care of the ball handling. They need a starting point guard who could bring the ball up the court and kind of get the offense in the flow of the game. Another thing that needs to happen is Andre Drummond needs to sit his ass down and find the bench because he's been a non-factor in the first 2 games.
I forgot he was on the court in the second game.
Nicholas Claxton gave more energy, and he didn't even have that great of a game, but at least he was showing you defensive
I
energy.
kind of like Claxton in these three, counting the play-in game. I feel like he's, for the most part, on the court. I feel like he's something there for them.
And look, it's not going to show up in the stats. He only had 3 points and 4 rebounds in game number 2 on Wednesday. But it's his energy on the defensive end.
Yep,
He's at least a more athletic center who can move around. And oh, by the way, the Celtics might be getting limited minutes from Robert Williams tomorrow, their best defensive big man. So that makes it even tougher on the Nets. Robert Williams is going to return faster than Ben Simmons. I mean, if he's able to play 5-on-5 scrimmages, and apparently he played 5-on-5 on Monday, 5-on-5 Wednesday, and 5-on-5 today, what is stopping you from playing tomorrow?
I heard
what is the difference between now and Monday?
Yeah.
You're in a must-win situation because you can't fall down 3 games to none. At that point, it's useless putting Ben Simmons on the court. You might as well get 10 to 15 minutes out of him tomorrow.
Exactly. You know, I heard callers all night.
At least if it's 2 games to 1, and Ben Simmons at least has some game action, guess what? We got ourselves a series now. And the Nets are still in decent shape by only having to win 1 game in Boston. Because guess what? They win their 2 games on their home court. We're going back to Boston 2-2. And that's every bit possible. But this game still falls on 2 people. Kevin Durant and Steve Nash. Because Steve Nash has been it's been the worst fourth quarter management I've ever seen. And you talk about a guy with I talked about before. You talk about a guy who doesn't know when to call timeouts because we talked about Chris Finch not calling timeout as Memphis was going on their long run. Steve Nash is like asleep at the wheel all the time. You can't let the players dictate it. You have to be a head coach at some point. And
what was the line after the game that I think was used about they didn't have energy in the second half? I think that was the word. I think it was after the post game. I want to say it was the energy was not there. It almost like sleepwalking was the term,
I wouldn't say the energy's not there. It's that their offense had a tough time getting anything going. And when you saw that 17-point lead late in the second quarter, all of a sudden become 10 by halftime,
well, that was my
knew the
point
second half was going to be a grind. And you knew that the Nets were going to have to grind out offensive possessions, while on the other end, Jason Tatum's going to get an easy layup, or Jaylen Brown's going to get an easy layup, or Peyton Pritchard's going to hit a wide-open 3, because guess what? Boston closes out on its shooters, and Brooklyn doesn't. That's the key difference right here, because we're not talking about 2 blowouts by the Celtics. We're talking about a 1-point win where Jason Tatum, got the buzzer layup, and a 7-point victory.
Game 1 was the last play of the game. The Nets had the lead. They should have won. The second game, Brooklyn had, I think, a 7-point lead. I think early fourth quarter going in right at the end of the
exactly. So
this was not a blowout.
But that's where it comes to coaching.
Right.
And that's where it comes to drawing up a play late. I mean, I bring it back to game 1 for a second. They're up 114, 111. They have that horrendous possession offensively, and then you let Jaylen Brown go out and get an easy layup. I mean, and it was easily 114, 113. So their game planning has been absolutely horrible. I almost hope that the Nets lose out in this first round. Whatever, if they lose in 5, 6, 7 games, even 4 games, they have to fire Steve Nash. Plain and simple. And my biggest fear is that the Nets do come back and they go on a little bit of a run here. And let's say they make the conference finals. What they won't, but let's say they make the conference finals. Guess what? They're not going to Steve Nash at that point. And that does nothing to this franchise. Because this franchise
they can still come back and win the series because you have Durant.
Of course they can. They have the 2 best players on the court in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And at some point, they have to start acting like it. And at some point, somebody has to shut down Jason. And at some point, somebody has to shut down Jaylen Brown because Jason Tatum, okay, he had an off game in game 2. But he's not going to be off again. Okay? You have to shut these guys down and stop giving up easy baskets. It's been too comment all season long. This team doesn't play any defense.
I heard you say a line, and you know what? It rings true. And I'm going to get to the brute force Brad Weiss here in a second. But
Please,
there
I
was
can't
there
yell
was a
anymore.
line you used. That, you know what? It rung so true in that this team, it's like ebbs and flows with them, and they have trouble for whatever reason in the fourth quarter. And there's moments you look at this team and you go, wow, you know what? This team can win the championship. And there's other times you look at them and it's almost like they disappear. And John Gonzalez had a comment here saying he saw the post when the Nets lost. He said, I hate this team, can't take it anymore. He thought he was driving back to Lindenhurst, New Jersey, and jumping in the Passaic River. I think John was being facetious, so obviously.
It's funny because I don't live in New Jersey. I live in New York, but
right. Well, I think that's John.
I mean, that's where I'm from Lyndhurst.
But I think that's what he picked up, and he said,
"Yeah."
And now John Gonzalez has said that the brute force is starting to sound. Justin Gianelli is starting to sound like the brute force. But I'm going to bring the brute force.
I'll tell you another big difference here.
Talk to me.
It's Mike D'Antoni's not on that sidelines. I think I felt confident in the coaching last year because at least Mike D'Antoni as a top assistant can at least have an understanding. And
he's been
and help Steve Nash along and have a different voice in that huddle, because clearly Steve Nash is a coach who doesn't know what's going on. You had Mike D'Antoni and an up and coming Ime Udoka on that coaching staff last year, so I felt decent about the coaching, even if I didn't have full confidence in Steve Nash. But at some point, a veteran has to get it. A veteran has to get there. A veteran has to be the head coach next year, and somebody who can get through to the other players.
Listen, I think certainly after Monday or some point later next week, we could be talking about that. But in the meantime, I'm going to bring the brute force Brad Weiss in, because obviously I know the brute force, very tough act for you to follow up here, and we're going to try and do that here and walk me through this, because, okay, you're a coach now, you've been a player, but you've got the Brooklyn Nets who still have maybe two of the best players in the entire postseason. So it's not as if that this team is out of it. We have a comment here from Carlos Otoro Chavez, who's usually with us here in some of the streams, and he says, this team has no consistency, there's no depth, and this team lacks confidence. The brute force, I mean,
no continuity either.
Walk me through what Carlos has to say and what this team can do to come back, because, like I said, you still got Durant. You still got Irving. I have a feeling that Durant's not going to go 13 for 41 the next two games with 12 turnovers. So what do you make here for the Nets in order for them to come back here and salvage this series here tomorrow night?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to give a round of applause to Justin Gianelli. That was awesome. I want to give that, first of all, because John Gonzalez is 100% right. He's got that great rant like me. So that's the same thing I had all season with the New York Knicks, and I'm used to,
Did you rub off on Justin? Do you feel proud because you rubbed off on him all these months now we've been together?
Listen, Justin's used to following me up when I go nuts. So this is a little different territory for me.
Good point.
But listen, he has every right to be this upset because it truthfully is very disappointing the way the Brooklyn Nets have played these first two games against the Celtics. Obviously, listen, like Justin said, it's been two close games so far. It's not like they've been blowouts. They've been two close games. Listen, it could have gone either way in both games. The Nets had a very good chance of winning both of them, which is why we all know that this series can easily change. And Brooklyn get the momentum and get right back in this series. But obviously there's many layers to this. And this is the first one I want to take, because Justin's 100% right about the coaching staff and Steve Nash. But here's the problem, okay? Who was the guy who had brought Steve Nash in as the coach? It was Kyrie Irving, all right? Kyrie Irving was the guy who basically went on the record and said, we don't need a coach. We'll just bring in Steve Nash because he's a former player and he could lead the group and, he'll be good for us and do it. We do whatever we want, and he could just be the coach that stands on the sideline. His quote was, "We don't really need a coach." Right. That was Kyrie Irving. So he was the guy who was the reason why Steve Nash is there. Now, to Justin's credit, just like he said, I personally agree with him 100%. I said it from the beginning with the Nets. I mean, the loss of Mike D'Antoni on that bench was huge, because Mike D'Antoni was almost like Steve Nash's backup. Like I almost feel like Mike D'Antoni was really the coach, and Steve Nash was kind of the puppet who was just standing there, maybe getting paid a little bit more, right? But was really just the guy. Mike D'Antoni was really the coach of that team. So
a figurehead, more or less.
Yeah, so in the end, listen, Steve Nash is obviously not a great coach. He's very inexperienced. He has a lot of experience to get. Unfortunately, that experience to get is not on a team that's ready to win a championship. And he, right now you need a veteran like Justin said. You need a coach that knows how to win. And ultimately, that's not what's happening. And the saddest part is, like Justin's point, I mean, the guy who should be one of the Coach of the Year candidates in Ime Udoka is out coaching him big time. And has done a great job with the Celtics. So, listen, I mean, let's just start with Kevin Durant. He's not playing well.
We've got some comments from that. First of all, let me read a couple of them because I want to get people in. Carlos Torres Chavez II had said Durant is not an enforcer. Teams can double and triple team both Kyrie and Irving. Anthony Finkel, who's been very vocal about Kevin Durant in the Sports Authorities group. I want to give Big Finkel a shout out for that. He says, KD can't take a team to the promised land. He's not better than LeBron. So, Brad, walk me through some of those things in here, and what do you think?
Yeah, well, what I think is that, I think that it's not really KD. I think you have to give the credit to the Celtics. The Celtics, again, we're the best defensive team in multiple different ratings and categories this season. They again, and one of the reasons why a lot of Nets fans and a lot of people were not exactly happy with the matchup with the Celtics is because of their defensive prowess. And the fact that they have played the Nets well this season, and they have played, and again, they've lost in the past to the Nets. So this is one of those things where they're motivated. They had a great season. They're clearly a very good defensive team, and they've done a great job on Durant. Basically making him, take tough shots. They're all up in him. They're making plays. They're forcing it into other people's hands. And listen, we talked about Bruce Brown having a great game. Sure. And again, this is how coaching goes. I'll give you guys a little bit of insight in how I coach. So we know, right, who the best players are on the other team. We're going to take them away and force others to beat us. So Bruce Brown scoring 20 points, yeah, it might seem like, all right, that's good for the Nets. But in the end, that's what the Celtics want. The Celtics want Bruce Brown to beat them. All right, they want Bruce Brown to score and make plays. If it's not Kevin Durant, right, that's what they want. And ultimately, it hasn't been Kevin Durant enough. And you also now talk about Kyrie Irving. He went from scoring 39 in the first game to 10 in the second game. That is a major drop-off. That is a very bad performance. And listen, he's all engaged in, the fans are cursing me out. The fans are doing this. Why are you even worried about the fans? Why are you giving middle fingers behind your head?
I think that's just Kyrie being Kyrie. Remember Manny Ramirez? We always say Manny.
I felt like it energized him, though. I felt like it because it looked like in game one it was energizing him.
But what happened in game two?
You know what? I don't have any answers, but you know what? And the worst part about it is you could say, oh, Bruce Brown had 20 points and all that stuff, and he had a really good game. But at the same time, what happens when it's crunch time? That's where coaching comes in, because your two best players are having off nights.
And let me get to Carlos Chavez here. And he says here, first comment was Celtics are young and fast. They depend on coaching. Then he says Nets can turn this around, but others have to step up, not just scoring, but they need rebounds and make their free throws.
That's directly on the two bigs, Nicholas Claxton and Andre Drummond, who are horrendous free throw shooters. But let me get to this real quick because look, if Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are struggling, you still have to continue to feed Goran Dragic. You still have to continue to feed Bruce Brown late in the game. What did they not do? Feed those two, because you know what? Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were forcing shots because they felt like they had to bring the team back once the Celtics.
So who's the guy then that changes that? Who's the guy going into tomorrow night that can stop that? Who's the guy that can say, you know what?
Well, you would hope Steve Nash has a brain to say, well, you know what, we have to go what's working with us.
Well, he's not doing that
to finish.
We're in agreement,
instead of relying on our two superstars if they're not having their best game. Now, again, listen, Kevin Durant can't be as awful as he was on Wednesday night. We get that. But one thing's for certain, regardless of what court they're on, whether it's the TD Garden or it's Barclays Center, Boston is still going to be great defensively, and they're still going to put the pressure on Kevin Durant. And it's up to Kevin Durant to start to find space. And it's up to Steve Nash to eventually get a brain and figure out, how can I create space for Kevin Durant? Because that's what it comes down to. And that's why this team, that's why this team's not going anywhere. And look, this franchise still has a window of opportunity. Kevin Durant signed long-term. Kyrie Irving does not plan on leaving. This is the team he grew up rooting for. Ben Simmons you'll eventually have on the court. But he's under contract for multiple years. And you still have Seth Curry on the roster next year too. There's a window of opportunity to win a championship still, even with this team not being able to likely get out of the first round this year. But that's why they have to have a better coach.
Well, I think
what was the stat? I'm not going to be sold a bill of goods on, okay, well, now this is year 3 for Steve Nash. We think he's going to get better. No, this is what Steve Nash is a head coach. You're not going to see better.
All right, so let me ask you guys this question. And obviously, Carlos had said here, it's coaching, not coaching, it's basketball common sense. John Gonzalez says it is what it is. Steve Nash is not Pat Riley. Carlos comes in here and says, if you don't score on takeaways and gets points other than pull-up jumpers, you're going to lose these games. I think that's fair points. That was kind of the Timberwolves' death yesterday. But let me ask you guys this question, and I'm going to throw it over to Brad because obviously we've got some people that are listening to this and they're curious. I mean, Steve Nash, Brad, and I hate to do these hypotheticals because the Nets can still definitely come back and make this a series because they have, Irving and Durant, and maybe you do get Ben Simmons. I don't know what even that means at this point. But do you bring Steve Nash back to brute force? Because, I mean, what are the options out there? I mean, if the Nets I'm assuming if they get swept, God forbid, you'd have to make the change. If they lose this in 6 or 7 games, I mean, I guess there would be a plausible path for Steve Nash to come back because you'd say, Kyrie had the COVID issues. Durant missed a bunch of time. You had the whole problems with Harden. Simmons never played in the regular season. This team really wasn't together. So theoretically, I guess there's a plausible case for Nash to come back if you lose in a long series. But what do you do here, Brad, then? Let's say if the Nets get bounced here, does Steve Nash come back before I get to a Carlos Chavez other comment?
Well, to Justin's point, he better not. If they get bounced, he better not. But this is the issue again, and this is where I can't blame Steve Nash. This is not. Listen, if the Nets get bounced, it should not be on Steve Nash. It should be on Kyrie Irving. Okay, because Kyrie Irving is the reason why Steve Nash is there. All right, I really firmly believe that. Okay, so again, I think it should be on Kyrie Irving. And listen, and Kyrie to himself too, like I was talking about before. I mean, he's putting up middle fingers. And in the second game, listen, I know he used his motivation in the first game, but in the second game, I think it actually hurt his play. He was too distracted. He never played up to par. People are talking about, obviously, and again, I'm not going and talking about any religion, but he's doing Ramadan. He
would be great for wrestling. I have to say, Kyrie Irving would be just awesome.
The thing with Kyrie Irving is he just finds, it's always something with Kyrie Irving. It's always something.
That's everywhere he's been. Boston, Cleveland, the Nets. It's like Manny Ramirez. He's the Manny Ramirez of the NBA.
So it's like, and listen, and the fact that he still has like the voice to basically state, that Steve Nash is the coach and they give him the job. And again, that can't be what happens. But yes, Steve Nash does need to go, and they do need to bring in another good coach. Now, you're talking about who potentially that could be. Well, there are some guys out there. I'll give you a few. Talking about Mark Jackson, who's still out there. Alvin Gentry, who's been a good coach. And I'll give you one that, first of all, this guy should have never been fired in the first place. All right. But how about Kenny Atkinson? I mean, this was a guy who was a great coach too.
That's an excellent point because I always thought Kenny Atkinson was
should have never been fired in the first place. I mean, was a great coach.
Against firing Kenny Atkinson.
Yep.
You know what he did with listen, Billy King put the Nets in a very bad place with that KG and Paul Pierce trade. Okay. And Kenny Atkinson was the developmental head coach for a lot of young guys, whether it was Jared Allen, Karis LeVert,
Joe Harris,
Spencer Dinwiddie. He was the guy that developed the core of the Nets team that has become very. No, I don't want Frank Vogel. No, I don't want Frank Vogel. But let me start by saying,
sure.
I don't necessarily believe that the Lakers should have fired Frank Vogel. I just don't really want him at this point.
Okay, but
Because
that's
clearly,
a good one by
I
John
think the biggest
Gonzalez.
issue he had was handling superstars. I think that was
Okay.
really the biggest
That's
issue.
a fair point.
But on to the next point about Kenny Atkinson. I mean, look, they had this core that we loved as fans. You know, I'll get with the players I just mentioned. I was a huge Jared Allen fan. And to see him go to Cleveland,
I always said, I was on the record, I like those net teams of 2018, 2019, before
they
COVID.
were a fun group. But
yes,
again,
I like them more than I like this team.
And that's the credit. But Kenny Atkinson gets the credit because he's the one who made the Nets an attractive place because of the development of players and the exciting young players. And that's why Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving wanted to sign here. Well, I mean, Kyrie Irving's a Nets fan, but still. But you're still bringing Kevin Durant along because he looks at Brooklyn as an attractive option because they're an up and coming team. Now you blow all that up because they wanted James Harden, and then that's turned into a whole spin cycle that the Nets can't seem to get out of.
I almost feel like the Nets franchise, since they've come to Brooklyn, it's almost like we've tried this a couple of different times. You mentioned, obviously, the whole thing with Garnett and Pierce and Darren Williams. Yeah, and to be fair, we weren't getting them in 2005, 2006 mode, but it
wasn't even that. It was just I don't need and Kevin Garnett, I still think of as a Timberwolf, even though he won the championship with the Boston Celtics. But Paul Pierce, he wore that disgusting green Celtics 34 for so many years.
I have to say, John Gonzalez is trying to make, I think, us all laugh at least here. And he says, Nets could bring back John Calipari. He probably wants to jump ship after losing St. Pierce. We're going to get to college basketball.
Hell, bring him in at this point. It's better than Steve Nash.
And Carlos says here, it's a win-now league. Nets made a mistake with the Harden deal. Yeah, I kind of think at this point that was really where I think it would have been okay, I guess, with Durant and Irving. But that's kind of like, what's the old expression, going for the jugular, and it didn't work out. That's really where, like, I think the Nets maybe win.
The only credit I'll give in the Harden deal was it may have saved Karis LeVert's life with the medical issue that was detected when he was when he went to Indiana. So. I mean, that might be the only saving grace out of that trade, but I mean, that trade was such a waste, and foolish me buying a Harden T-shirt, like a month after he came here, and it's already in the donations bin.
Well, that's like me. I have a 2015 Mets Matt Harvey World Series shirt. I don't think I've worn it like ever. I think I wore it one time, so it's one of those things. And John Gonzalez is just making me laugh thinking about this comment here. Nets could bring back John Calipari again. That just makes me laugh.
Oh yeah.
John Calipari was the Nets coach for I think about 2.5 years in the late '90s, and that was kind of like a comical. They had one season they went to the postseason and faced the Bulls, and then the next year
it was the 97-98
team.
97-98 they made the playoffs, and then remember you had the whole Jason Williams incident. Valentine's Day incident or something, the shooting of a limo driver.
You ever heard that story, Brad, where Jason Williams, like, he's playing around, he's got a shotgun in his house, and he kills the limo driver, and he was like, oops, I mean, just goofy, bizarre incident.
Also probably tore his ACL in the process because he was also always injured.
I think ESPN did a 30 for 30 on him a while back, and Carlos chimes in here and says, Harden is poisonous to every up-and-coming team. Yeah, I mean, you know what? It just seems to be the theme here. So ultimately, look, the Nets are on the clock. All I'm going to say here is that the Nets are definitely on the clock tomorrow night, 7:30. It's almost like you're watching what could be a Boston Massacre, or maybe Brooklyn's going to make what they would say as Led Zeppelin would sing, Achilles' Last Stand here. So we'll certainly see if the Nets will do that here as we're speaking all things related here for the world of sports. For I guess about 40 or 45 minutes here, and Carlos chimes in here and says, again, he rattles the teams off, OKC, Houston, Nets, and now Philly. Yeah, but Philly right now, not to really what he's done, but Philly's up. We'll see. Stay tuned with the 76ers, Carlos. I have a feeling that on next week's show we might be talking about that, but certainly we are speaking all the things here in the world of sports. There's a lot going on here. I think back to maybe last year at this time with the brute force, and we didn't have much to talk about right in the world of sports. We were kind of talking about some things, but Carlos has chimed in here and says, Philly is done. Carlos, my friend, Philly is up 3-0 on Toronto. Are you sure you still want to say that? that team's a mess. But Carlos, my friend, Philly's up 3-0.
I will say they are in a lot of trouble if Boston's the matchup. I do believe that should the Nets end up succumbing to the Celtics, and I think I'm pretty confident saying that Boston's going to win this series in one facet or another. I don't think that the Celtics are going to be because the Celtics are the 2 seed. The Phillies,
Philly plays the winner of Miami and Atlanta. So
no, I still think they'd lose to Miami.
I agree, but I gotta again, and this doesn't happen often. I agree with John Gonzalez. Philly is done. I don't think so. 100% right. They're not done.
No, I agree.
And again, Carlos, my friend, he says it's a Toronto and the West will win the championship this year. Toronto, Carlos, my friend, help me out. Are you talking about Toronto in baseball? Because Toronto in basketball is down 3-0. I'm not trying to be facetious, my friend. We love you. You've been on some of my streams before when we do wrestling, but Philly's up 3-0 on Toronto. Are you saying Toronto's coming back and beating Philly to win the next 4 games? I mean, that's never happened before in the NBA. So, I mean, I'm almost I'm not even going to move on right now because I'm actually getting a lot of feedback with this. But I mean, are you sure? I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so I can say this because I was on there. Is that your final answer, my friend? So, and then John Gonzalez chimes in here. John Gonzalez is funny. What a trooper John Gonzalez is. Toronto Argonauts, and then Carlos says Toronto is crap. Okay, so I think you might be referring to then something else, but the West will win the championship this year. That would make more sense. Okay, Carlos. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt on that because Carlos, you're with us, and obviously you're a big supporter of ours, and I do want to get to it here. And Carlos does confirm. He says the Western Conference won the championship. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we concluded a little while ago with Golden State, that they might have the kind of inside track on that, concerning the way they've played and the players coming back. So I think Carlos, good job on that. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but I want to stay with basketball very quickly before I kind of, run quickly on football and baseball. We'll do more baseball next week when we get baseball guys back, like a Rob Maraska and a Chris Bezayer and Billy McInerney. And we talk enough baseball on Sportswire Radio anyway to begin with. And I think right now, most people, especially on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, probably want to hear basketball because they don't have baseball in North Carolina technically. So,
since we're on Tobacco Road Sports, Tobacco Road Radio, we should bring up the Charlotte Hornets. And today they announced the firing of James Borrego, their head coach. So,
okay,
it's gonna be a new era. We'll see where Michael Jordan decides to go on a head coach.
And John Gonzalez says talk some draft. We're gonna do that, John. Actually, you know what? I'll do it now. We'll save the Jay Wright after that. So, you know what? We'll talk some NFL draft because John Gonzalez wants to hear it, and I don't want to disappoint anybody because Tobacco Road Sports Radio does want to hear NFL draft. And let's go with it here, guys. I mean, I'll go with the brute force, and I'll go with Justin. So let's go with it here. I mean, what are you expecting? Let's go Jets. Let's go Giants. If you want to throw a thought and anything else with the number 1 pick, because I know John Gonzalez wants to hear his beloved Detroit Lions, and you guys have been going back and forth with that undoubtedly. But give me your thoughts on the draft because by the time we're here next Friday, the first round will have passed. So give me your thoughts on what we can expect with our local teams and maybe what the top pick will be.
Yeah, well, again, and what makes this draft so interesting, like we talked about last week, is that it's changing like by the day. Like we really don't know what's going to happen in the first round with the first pick. Can we predict it? Sure. But again, it's not like every year you kind of have that, all right, this guy's going to be the first pick. Not really this year where you could say that. So it's definitely tough. Now, to go to our local teams, obviously both of our Jets and Giants have 2 first-round picks relatively early.
The Jets have 4 of the first 38 picks, I would remind you.
Yeah. So, listen, I totally expect the Jets. In my opinion, I think they're going to look at who the most talented player is that's on that draft board and see if it's what they need and go with it. Now, again, it depends on what happens. And, of course, John Gonzalez, your Detroit Lions, are going to play a big factor in that. whatever you guys decide to do, whether you guys draft like a Hutchinson, depending on if he's there, amongst others. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I think the Jets take the best available. And then I think the most fascinating pick is going to be the 10th pick for the Jets. I'm really, I keep going back. And again, it depends on what's there. If the best wide receiver's on the board, could they potentially do it? Yeah. Do I think it's the best thing to do? No. I want them to continue to improve defensively, and also maybe another piece offensive on the line. So again, who knows? I mean, it's going to be based on what's there. I can't really make a prediction saying this guy is going to be drafted.
Well, I have something to say.
I have a couple of predictions.
I have something to say, and I want to say something before I get to Justin, because Carlos says something here, and I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it in a second. So Carlos is kind of stealing my thunder, but Carlos, let me speak here. So he says, there's not one player that can change the face of the Giants or the Jets, but I'm going to throw it out there because I'm sure people listen to radio. I'm sure people have seen social media, but maybe there's a player out there that maybe could change the face of the Jets through the trade, because from what we read and understood, there is a player, and you might have heard of him, Carlos, everybody here that's listening and watching, named Deebo Samuel. And the Jets, maybe they have the chips to maybe make
they
that
have the
move.
chips for sure.
All right, so they have the chips.
And not only the chips,
Justin,
the familiar. They have the familiarity of the San Francisco offensive system with Mike LaFleur as the offensive coordinator and Robert Saleh, the head coach. So there is that familiarity there. Now, if you could, I don't want to trade the 10th pick.
All right.
If I absolutely have to, I will for Deebo. I would like to, even if it means both of the top second round picks, I'd do it. If you're telling me 35 and 38 as part of the package, and I could keep 4 and 10, then absolutely, because then that changed my entire dynamic and draft the 2 players that I believe the Jets should take in the first round of this draft. And I'm gonna say that the Jacksonville Jaguars are gonna go with Evan Neal number 1. Okay. They're gonna go offensive tackle. They're gonna protect Trevor Lawrence. Now, the biggest wild card in this draft actually is the Detroit Lions. They do hold this. Massive.
John Gonzalez. All of a sudden, he gets.
They hold this massive wild card at number 2, because I think that. And no, we can't say that for certain that Zach's holding the Jets back. We've seen.
I kind of agree.
We've seen him play 1 year. Let's pump the brakes both ways.
Absolutely.
We need to see more from Zach Wilson. Absolutely, but at the same time, they are the big wild card, because while I don't think that they're going to go quarterback, they might shock us and do that. They really might.
Yeah, you know what's funny? One of my listeners, my friend said that.
I firmly believe that they're going to go Aiden Hutchinson number 2. Now, then you go to the Texans at number 3. I'm not sure what the Texans. The Texans are not going to go quarterback. They're going to at least give Davis Mills a year, just 1 more year, and see what they got. They might go Kayvon Thibodeau. They might not. We're not sure. They might go Ike Ekwonu and get Davis Mills a tackle. And you could certainly see 2 of the top 3 picks being tackles, which means Kayvon Thibodeau could be available at 4. But I also think Kayvon Thibodeau could be the number 1 pick as well. That's like, to Brad's point, we don't know who's going to go number 1. To me, I think that they're going to go either Thibodeau. I don't think the Jaguars are going to pick Hutchinson. I'd be surprised. Now, watch, I'm wrong. They pick Hutchinson. That's why we're not the draft experts, and that's why we're not in the draft war room.
Right.
But if Hutchinson goes 1, then Thibodeau's going 2, because I think that Detroit will likely go pass rusher. I think they could surprise us with the quarterback. I think the first team to take a quarterback would be the Carolina Panthers. They'll take Kenny Pickett at 6. But here's how I view number 4. Here's how I view number 4. Number 4, I want either Kayvon Thibodeau, and if he's off the board, give me Sauce Gardner. I will take. And number 10, if Sauce Gardner is the pick at number 10, give me Jordan Davis at 10. Jordan Davis is a viable, logical pick at number 10. And if the Jets could give 2 second-round picks, plus more, obviously, and get Deebo Samuel from the San Francisco 49ers, then absolutely you could go Gardner, Davis, and now you've solidified the front end. I mean, you look at the speed that Jordan Davis has. I mean, it's just utter ridiculous. There's very few men as big as he is that could run that fast. It's really a scary thought, because getting into the backfield as quick as he can ruin an entire game. Jordan Davis is 341 pounds. He ran a 4.7840.
We've got a number of comments I want to try to get up here and follow up with. John Gonzalez says Davis is not a pass rusher, strictly run stuffer. Carlos had said before that Deebo needs to get on a winning team. Well, I guess. I mean, I'll throw it out there to Brad. I mean, some of these things you're hearing. I mean, you want to jump on that. And Carlos also says here, you got a better shot at getting to the playoffs with the Patriots or some other team.
It's all about draft capital and money, but that's what it is. So I can admire Carlos's comments and his continuous ripping of the Jets. The Jets are a young team on the ascend. They still need more pieces, plenty more pieces. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of a rebuild. John Gonzalez, Malik Willis, the Steelers. I don't know that he falls to 20 though. That's a long drop, and I'm not sure that he lasts that long. If you're telling me the Steelers trade up, maybe. But we'll see what that would cost them.
Giants are in the same black hole.
Well, the Giants are further back. The Jets at least have the guy that they believe is their starting quarterback. They've signed some pieces. Remember, you're going to get a healthy Carl Lawson.
I feel like with Wilson, he's only had 1 year. Jones has had. This is going into year 4.
He's only had 1 year.
Meadowlands are now a viable swamp.
That's been a fact.
Well, that's definitely been a fact. I mean,
as somebody who grew up 5 minutes from Giant Stadium and now MetLife Stadium, it's a swamp.
Well, yeah. Listen, for all those who used to go to Six Flags, we used to always kind of get worried. Oh, we're going to be get lost and go into a swamp or whatever it is. But then again,
please, Jackson, New Jersey is so far away from the swamps.
I know, but that's what people. And to be fair, half of Staten Island is kind of on some weird land. So I mean, at this point, at the end of the day, we're all on something. But and let's get to Brad, because Brad is a lot of. I'm trying to follow up with all these comments here, left and right, by Carlos Chavez and John Gonzalez. But I mean, follow up some of these things. I mean, what do you think here? Because I do think that Deebo Samuel would be good for the Jets, and I think that could be the weapon. And why not, if Deebo Samuel comes to the Jets, that the Jets couldn't go to the next level? Because now you've given Zach Wilson that weapon, a legitimate weapon. I mean, this guy is a superstar. I mean, to me, if I'm the general manager, I mean, I would seriously entertain bringing in Deebo Samuel. I mean, if he wants out, why not? What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And listen, to be honest with you, I mean, we just saw it a week or two ago. The Jets were aggressive on Tyreek Hill. Who's to say that they shouldn't be on Deebo Samuel?
I think I want Deebo over Tyreek Hill, though, because you know what? Tyreek Hill has had Pat Mahomes.
No, listen, I actually agree with that. And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that, to you guys' point, right, that offensive system and that coaching staff in New York now with the Jets is primarily from the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, I think part of Deebo Samuel potentially wanting to play for the Jets would be Robert Saleh. I'm sure that has to play a factor in it. So, listen, yes, I mean, he would absolutely transform our team from obviously having a lethal weapon to throw to also having a guy who could also, do many different things, play outside, play in the slot, run the ball, I mean, all these different things he could do to make our offense so much better and make us a team, like we all said, it could be a 500, maybe better than 500 team that could compete for a wild card. Who knows? But in the end, it's about the development of Zach Wilson. And if you give him a weapon like this, it can help him develop for sure. Debo's been not only a great player, but he's also been a great person as from anything I heard. He's been one of these guys that players like to play with, and he's not like a bad, like one of the quote unquote diva that you call it.
Not Kyrie Irving then.
Right. So listen, I think it would be a great move for the Jets. And I would, and listen, I understand Justin's point. You don't want to trade the 10th pick, but I would consider it if it was for Deebo Samuel. I would consider.
Like I said, if it comes down to it, I will. But
I would consider it. I do it, but I would consider it. So I will say that. Now, to Justin's point about who he thinks the Jets are going to get at that 4th pick, I'm a big fan of Sauce Gardner, and I think they really do need a cornerback. I really think they do. I think that has to be the pick for the Jets. Now, obviously, it's going to be tough if you have a guy like Thibodeau there. Let
me get a comment here real quick because this is somebody that's actually on our station. That is, of course, DB Dirty Bird, who does a phenomenal job with the sit-down mark. But you're actually our opening here before we go live. The fact, every time we go live, right before we're live, the sit-down marks are on sportnarium.com/player. And I want to get to Dirty Bird, of course, because he's actually, I believe, you were just at a wrestling event not too long ago. So the fact that he's here is a big deal. He says here, chances the Falcons move up to get a quarterback. Anybody's thoughts on that? Do the Falcons move up for a quarterback for Dirty Bird?
I think it's very possible. Right now they're currently sitting with the 8th overall pick. Now it'll be interesting to see who they're interested and who they have scouted, because now it becomes a battle of who's going to go where, because they could throw, Carolina could throw us a curveball and take Malik Willis, but from everything you read and the connection between Matt Rule and Kenny Pickett. Remember, Kenny Pickett was planning on going to Temple while Matt Rule was still the head coach at Temple. So there is a clear connection there, and that would probably be the seamless fit for the Carolina Panthers. I don't know that they necessarily need to trade up, but they might have to. And you know what? You're looking at a team like the Houston Texans jumping at, as the third pick. That could be that they could be that team that trades out if they're not sold on a certain player. Going from 8 to 3 would give Houston a nice haul of draft picks, in which they got plenty more because of the Deshaun Watson trade. Now you're talking about a 5-spot drop down. There's a point value and a point system that's used for these teams to make trades. Yes, nice.
And for you, Brad, jump in here. Do you think the Falcons would get a quarterback and some of these things in here? I'm reading over these different comments, and Carlos says, actually, here comes Dirty Bird. He says here, he would like to get another young receiver and get a quarterback in next year's big crop of college quarterbacks going pro. For you, Brad, walk me through some of that, because I'm getting comments here left and right. I mean, my God, give me a minute to.
How are you keeping up?
We're trying.
Well, first of all, thank you to everybody who's supporting the show right now.
Absolutely.
Shout out. So that's
absolutely
awesome.
The more watching, the better.
That's awesome.
We're doing that.
To everybody that's supporting. But listen, I actually do agree. I feel like the Atlanta Falcons could trade up for sure for a quarterback, but I actually think they're better suited to try to get a quarterback next year. Listen, they have Mariota for 2 years, I believe it is. 2-year contract, so they could go this year with him, and then next year bring in the quarterback that they want. They don't necessarily have to do it unless you obviously get a good deal, or maybe you move up in the draft. You're able to maybe help yourself in that case. Not maybe give up too much for it. Again, if you're really on someone, like if the Atlanta Falcons really like a specific player and they want to move up, then okay. But I do think they don't have to do it. I think they could go a year with Mariota and then next year draft their quarterback, and still be able to, like TV broadcast is saying, basically just take some more talent this season, draft a few more players, and then next year add the quarterback, and then bring it all together, and hopefully Atlanta goes in the right direction. So I don't think they have to do it, but they could do it potentially.
And he also
And you look at
said-
even at eight, that might be a good spot to get like a Treylon Burks, and then you get the first receiver in the draft, and or Drake London, and
And he wants offensive line.
offensive line too. There's going to be, I think, three that will project to be top 10 picks. Again, I don't think if Evan Neal's not the first tackle taken, and let's say the Texans take Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal's not falling past the Giants at 5, but there's going to be other offensive linemen readily available for them at 8. And that would be a nice logical pick, build on the offensive line. And, for the first time, since Vic really, the Falcons will at least have a mobile quarterback. One of the, as great as Matt Ryan was for them, we all know mobility was not his strength.
No, he might have been more mobile in those Tide commercials. That's kind of the running joke here. And John Gonzalez chimes in here and says, Kenny Pickett could be the Falcons pick unless they wait for a Desmond Ritter. Anybody?
The thing is, I don't think he's not going to hit 8. Again, okay. I think that Kenny Pickett will be the first quarterback off the board. And again, we could cater to the Tobacco Road group, and the people listening in North Carolina. Listen, you're probably drafting your franchise quarterback with the 6th overall pick, and that's the one pick I'm pretty firm in.
You've been talking about that for a long time.
Look, I've been on Kenny Pickett being the first quarterback taken, and we weren't sure with all the quarterback moves.
I think you've been talking about that for about 5 months.
Going to be quarterback needy.
Yeah, I think for about
because
5
months. We thought originally that Deshaun Watson could be in the running for the Panthers.
Yep.
And it turned out that wasn't the case. And so now you're looking at Carolina as one of the prominent QB needy teams. And there's a distinct fit at the top of the draft.
And Dirty Birds comes in here and says, which I heard this, I think Sal Licata said this because on the fan, he's a Falcons fan. He said, yes. I'll be a pseudo Colts fan too. First year without Ryan. Hope he does well. Yeah, I kind of do think in a sense there are going to be Falcons fans out there. Say that. And also, Carlos Chavez has some comments in here. Of course, Carlos, he says Falcons stay away from a wideout this year after that whole Calvin Ridley situation.
No, I think that makes them more go. It makes them more go after one.
And he says also Ritter might end up in Detroit. So that kind of goes back off to what we were saying, I think, guys, about Detroit maybe drafting
Ritter in the draft this year. Wasn't he a 6th-year senior?
I think John Gonzalez had first mentioned him because I'm pretty sure John Gonzalez, if you want to correct me, and I have more comments in here. In fact, I got to get through all of them in here. It says, John Gonzalez, here's what John Gonzalez had to say because I think Brad is frozen in time here. He says here, early on, I had Pickett to the Falcons. He's a South Jersey kid, but I don't think so anymore. He meant
to the Eagles. The Philly, South Jersey.
Okay. Why did I think the Falcons and the Birds? But
Birds.
Dirty Birds loving what we're doing. So thank you, Dirty Bird, for tuning in.
Desmond Ritter could be an interesting pick for the Detroit Lions in like the 2nd round, maybe.
Okay.
I don't think that Ritter is going to be a 1st round pick. I think you're probably looking at 3 quarterbacks going in the 1st round. You're looking at Kenny Pickett, obviously, Malik Willis, and Matt Corral. Now, again, if we've heard how much Mike Tomlin loves Malik Willis. Now, that could be a situation where the Steelers trade up, and we'll see. Where how, because they're going to have to give up a haul because they're coming from 20. They're coming from 20. Now, they were in this NFL purgatory situation where they snuck into the playoffs, but they weren't. We knew they weren't a great team, but they're also the situation.
Well, John Gonzalez thought they were going to.
But the situation also hinged on whether or not Ben Roethlisberger decided to keep playing or not.
Yeah.
He obviously chose to retire. You signed Mitchell Trubisky in the offseason, and now you have. I think you still have Mason Rudolph as the backup. I know that's a tough. It's a tough situation, obviously, with what happened to Dwayne Haskins, but. Because he probably would have been in the mix too. But right now you got Mitchell Trubisky and you have Mason Rudolph on the roster. We'll see.
And John Gonzalez also says here, no, not Desmond to the Lions, Corral or Sam Howell. Okay.
Sam Howell could sneak into the first round. I feel like he's going to be a high second round pick too. I don't know, yeah, but then again, teams get desperate when it comes to quarterbacks, and the perfect example was the 2016 NFL Draft, where the Rams and Eagles both traded up to 1 and 2 to take Jared Goff and Carson Wentz in that order. I mean, and you think about all of the drafts since then. The only draft since 2016 where a quarterback did not go number 1 was 2017 when the Cleveland Browns drafted Myles Garrett. So, I mean, you think about 2018, Baker Mayfield was the first overall pick. 2019, the Cardinals took Kyler Murray first overall. 2020, we know about Joe Burrow going first overall. 2021, you had a plethora of quarterbacks. You had quarterbacks go 1, 2, and 3 with
Right.
Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. So, I mean, we've seen teams get desperate for a quarterback. So could Sam Howell jump into the first round? He could, but I don't know that he does.
Let me get Brad in for the Pittsburgh Steelers because Brad, I always love
Favorite
talking
team
about
to
the
talk about.
Steelers because I'm looking at this Carlos Chavez comment. It was almost like time for you to come back on the stream here, and he says here, Trubisky and Mason Rudolph, LOL, which is I kind of think most people might agree with that. He says Pittsburgh is going to be depending on defense for like 2 more seasons, and we were kind of talking just before you came back on the stream here, and that there are quarterbacks right now that it's kind of like a weak draft for quarterbacks to kind of summarize it. And usually we're looking at a first round pick, or obviously the Jets were very high in the draft last year, and Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville and Trey Lance, Kyler Murray before that, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, when it comes to Pittsburgh Steelers, you want to take a shot at John Gonzalez? You want to say anything out there? Because I'm sure he's hearing this right now when it comes to those Pittsburgh Steelers. You want to say anything to him on that?
Oh, of course. I mean, listen, Carlos is saying that they're going to have to depend on the defense. I mean, first of all, that defense that you were supposed to depend on got crushed at the end of last season. In that game, the infamous game that John Gonzalez picked, which I won't even refer to because I don't want to talk about it right now for him. But anyway, what I will say is this: in order for Pittsburgh to win game, Pittsburgh's defense is going to have to score, meaning touchdowns off turnovers, okay? Because ultimately, their offense is going to be egregiously awful. Trubisky is not obviously going to get it done. Listen, will he have his ups and downs? Yes. But, again, you're talking about an AFC that's pretty damn good right now. They're going to go against some stiff competition. He doesn't step up to the plate against these elite teams. They're not going to have a chance. The only chance is going to be
forget the conference. Look at the AFC North.
I was going to say you got Lamar Jackson. You got obviously
Burrow. We don't have to go further than the division. So in the end, their offense is not going to. It wasn't even that good with Ben Roethlisberger. You think it's going to get better with Trubisky and Mason Rudolph, who
the only thing I could say about Trubisky trying to be positive is he's got a winning record as a quarterback. That's the only positive I could really.
Personally, and look, don't make me out to be this like Mitch Trubisky fanboy, but let's slow the roll a little bit.
Yeah, we did talk about the stats on one show.
Look, he's not this horrendous quarterback we make him out to be.
He's not Daniel Jones, basically.
No, he's not Daniel Jones. He's not Sam Darnold. Is he a guy that I trust to win me big games? It's not. But do I think I can have sheer at least competence at the quarterback position? I do. Yeah. I don't think he's just this total incapable quarterback. I don't think he's great by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think he's just this complete incompetent fool who doesn't know what he's doing.
I'll tell you what, maybe and I hate to really defend Mitchell Trubisky, but maybe I would rather have Mitchell Trubisky as my quarterback than Marcus Mariota right now. I mean, that might be
all right, 100%. 100%.
Right.
Now, granted, Mariota gives you that athleticism, but I would take.
And listen, the fact that you just made that comparison, like that's bad. But listen, I understand what Justin's saying. I think he's right. But in the end, guess what?
I can't even repeat what John Gonzalez just said. He says, all I'll say is Trubisky will be fine. I'm not going to say what he said on.
Listen, you know what? He'll be fine on the Steelers for a year or two, and then he'll be probably gone. And again, listen, I mean, he is a capable quarterback. The issue is this is not any other organization. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers we're talking about.
I know.
If you're not a elite quarterback, you're not somebody leading the team to a 500 record or better because that's what they're used to every damn year, then you're not good. And you're not ready to be the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback. So I'm very.
You got to be fair. You got to be fair. They've only really had two elite quarterbacks. It's Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, was Cordell Stewart really an elite quarterback? He wasn't. Charlie Batch and Tommy Maddox weren't great, but granted, they found their way to above 500, and they're almost like the Yankees in this sense, where they find their way over 500.
If I recall correctly, Neil O'Donnell went to a Super Bowl before he became a Jet.
Neil O'Donnell went to a Super Bowl. They lost, but he went.
And I got a couple more comments, and I got a bunch from here. I'm trying to keep up everybody here. So Dirty Bird's back to the house. He says, how many games will the Falcons win with Mariota? That's what he says here. And
I'd have to look. You know what? With a blind, not looking at the schedule, let's say maximum 6.
I say 7. What do you about?
Because you know what? It's not okay. Because first of all, let's give them a little credit. They're not in a tough division. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, prominent contender for the
John Gonzalez, 3 wins.
No. They'll win more than 3.
John Gonzalez.
So let's be fair to the Falcons for a second. The division is not all that great. Buccaneers, Super Bowl contender, absolutely. But the Saints are not. The Saints are not going to be a good team next year.
Panthers are bad.
The Panthers are in a rebuild mode. They're in a bad situation. There's a very fair possibility that the Falcons are the second best team in the NFC South. So can they win 6 to 7 games? I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But I won't really give them much more than that because their team as a whole is.
Brad, you're kind of nodding, and I got a bunch of more comments.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think it's just like you guys are saying, the reason why you got to give them maybe like 5 or 6 games is just because of their division, simply. I mean, they're going to win some of those division games because their division is very weak. So, obviously besides the Buccaneers, I mean, I don't think anyone else knocks your socks off at all. So in the end, I think they get a few wins there. And then, they'll probably beat a few other teams. I see like a potential couple opponents like the Washington football team. They might get a win there. I'm sorry, the Washington Commanders. I apologize.
I was waiting for that.
The Commanders, all right?
Redskins.
So, they got the Steelers on their schedule potentially. The Carolina's in their division. Seattle's on their schedule, who we don't know who the hell's quarterbacking. So, again, they could find their way to 5 or 6 wins for sure. Yeah.
And Carlos says here they'll win more than 7. Do they play the Jets and Giants this year? I'll look at the Falcons schedule.
The Jets play the Falcons. The answer is no on the Jets because the Jets and the Falcons met this past year.
Okay.
The Giants, right. I can't.
Looking at it here, I don't think they play either.
And Dirty Bird here, he's being honest. We love Dirty Bird. Everything at the Sit Down Marks do. Please follow the Sit Down Marks on Instagram and Twitter at Sit Down Marks. Follow AJ Primo for all the great things that they do. You can hear them just like the baseball banter throughout the week here on sportnarium.com/player. So please follow the Sit Down Marks. They do a phenomenal job for us on Sportswire Radio. He says here it's going to be honest, 5-12. So that's his thought. And then Carlos disagrees. He thinks that Marcus Mariota is a way better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky. He says here that Mariota led the Titans to the playoffs, had 4 offensive coordinators. I got more comments in here. And he says here, John Gonzalez, who's trying to play games, who says, I don't see the brood siren going on for the Falcons.
Oh, boy. Boy.
And Carlos says 5-12. So, yeah, I kind of think, I think like 7 wins. What were they, 7-10 last year?
And you just figure a possible 3-1 or even 4-0 against the Saints
against the Panthers.
So you're thinking potentially at least 3 wins out of that group. You're probably going to go 0-2. I mean, against the Bucs, but I mean it's a division game. Who the heck knows? I mean, we saw the Falcons give them a couple close battles last year.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
division games can go either way, honestly, because the opponent so well.
I mean, listen, the Falcons hung around the playoff race probably a lot longer than anybody really had anticipated. And
I agree.
certainly,
Yeah.
I think all of us did on the show. We would talk about them perennially. And looking at their schedule coming up, as Brad had pointed out, they have Washington in Washington. They have also Arizona. Well, that's going to be tough. San Francisco. They have Cleveland at home. Okay, maybe that's a 50-50 game. Pittsburgh, maybe 50-50 game in Atlanta. Baltimore and Baltimore, probably a loss. They've got Cincinnati and Cincinnati, Los Angeles at Los Angeles. Those are probably losses. Seattle, I would think they could win. Chargers at home, I'd say probably lose that. And you've got the Bears. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say 7 wins. And
the Bears are it's a winnable game.
And Dirty Bird has tickets for the Falcons and Bengals game. So, I mean, that means Dirty Bird, you got to basically come on before that game. And, well, you're always on with us. You're always on Sportswire Radio. I mean, listen, you're practically on the station more than anybody else. And, in fact, I got to give the Sit Down Marks a quick shout out one more time because all of our shows on Sportswire Radio, they're one of the originals, in fact, the Sit Down Marks. For all of us that have been on the station, they've been on for just about a year now, right? I think we're on episode 60, and they've been on for just about almost all of those episodes. I think we're like 50 episodes, Dirty Bird. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's been played on Sportswire Radio. I mean, you've been with us almost since the beginning. So I got to give the guys a lot of credit for all the great things that they do for us. Want to make sure that, again, Sit Down Marks, please follow them, Twitter, Instagram, also Facebook. The guys are all over the place. They are definitely holding it down for us. So Friday, listen, they're our warm-up. Before we come on live, the warm-up is the Sit Down Marks. So how could you not follow the Sit Down Marks? And Carlos, yes, and Dirty Bird says yes. Because, well, Dirty Bird, I heard the show today, by the way. So obviously I knew it was episode 60. So you've been with us for just about, I'd say, 50 of those shows. And Carlos says Falcons will be okay at the business term. But, yeah, I kind of think that's what I think. 7 wins. I don't know, maybe 8 if it's all luck falls through. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. They were 7-10, and they kind of hung around the playoff race throughout the entire year. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Before we move on here and get to a quick thought or two on college basketball and maybe a baseball thought, depending on time before closing thoughts for both of you guys. I'll go with Brad real quick and Justin real quick. Shotgun. Any other thoughts here for closing thoughts? And John Gonzalez is addressing Dirty Bird. Oh, boy. He says, hey, Dirty Bird, I'm a long-suffering Jets fan. Can't really feel bad for the Falcons. Well, I guess touche, because the Falcons have been to 2 Super Bowls in our lifetime, right? 98 against the Broncos and John Elway, and the unfortunate one against the Patriots. But they've been to 2 Super Bowls. So, I mean, they've been to 2, right? As Jet fans here, right? We've all seen, well, maybe John saw, maybe John.
Just for reference, next time they get there, just don't have a 28-3 lead.
Good point. But they've been to 2, right? For all of us here in our lifetime, we haven't seen a Jets Super Bowl. So to be fair, you've got 2 Super Bowls. I mean, you've been to 2. Yeah, I mean, you haven't won them, but at least you got to go see 2 of them. I mean, And Dirty Bird thanks us. He says, thank you for all of your support. Great stuff always from the Sportswire family. And, of course, love the Sit Down Marks. And I almost have to say it, Dirty Bird. I got to get on the stream one of these days. I think I got to come on with you guys one of these days. One of these days we'll work on that. But before we move on to other topics, I'll go with Brad and Justin. Shotgun real quick for me. Anything NFL draft or NFL outside related you're looking for in here? And Dirty Bird says we're both in the Zero Rings Club. Yeah, that's a fair point. But anything, Brad, shotgun here between now and next week, NFL draft, non-draft you're looking for? And then I'll get to Justin, shotgun-wise.
Well, yeah, obviously we talked about one of the big stories is going to be wondering what happens with Deebo Samuel. Obviously, with the news and with everything that's gone on, you got to assume that there could be a lot of, talk and before the draft occurs. So that's something that obviously we would keep our eye on. Quickly, I'll just touch on the Giants since we talked a lot about what the Jets are going to do. Obviously, we know what the Giants have to do with their first pick. They got to get an offensive lineman. Whatever the best available guy is, I'm pretty sure that's, what they must do. To continue to buffer up what Dave Gettleman used to call the hog mollies. All right, they got to continue to, they got to actually get the hog mollies, okay? Because they're working at it, but they're not doing a great job. So this year they got to get another one, and then with their second pick, we'll see what ultimately is there and what they need. Again, we'll see. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that second pick yet, but again, it'll be interesting to see what those Giants do with the Jets, like we talked about. It'll probably come down to Thibodeau or Gardner. I'm really excited to see Gardner in the Jets uniform if that was the case. I think that's a great pick. And I like Justin Gianelli's pick with Davis. I really do. I think that's a great one at 10. And I would also say, and one guy that could potentially be there at 10, I don't know if he will be, but wide receiver Jameson Williams from Alabama. If he's there and maybe the 40,
there's a solid chance he is.
Yeah,
I really think. I think there's teams that are still a little concerned about the ACL, but we've seen these guys, these kids come back very fast from these ACL Achilles injuries and just be even better. So I mean, I'm certainly not one who's scared off at the thought of Jameson Williams at 10. I think he personally is the best receiver in the draft. So I would certainly, if the Jets, I'm doing a dance party if Jameson Williams is like at 10. Jordan Davis is the guy I would actually select.
To John Gonzalez's point. Yeah, Drake London.
Another option. Can't be upset with that one. I think Drake London.
Listen, I think more importantly, if you get to draft night and maybe Deebo Samuel's still sitting out there, and let's say the 49ers really like one of these guys and really want one of these guys, then maybe you could draft them, and then that could be a piece possibly to trade and get Deebo Samuel. So we'll ultimately see. I think that's going to be the biggest story. Like we said, what's going to make it interesting, because every year we come on and we talk about our predictions for the draft, and most of the time it's pretty much like, all right, well, this guy's going to be the first pick, and this guy's like this year makes it fun because we don't know.
Well, I'm going to make one prediction, which is going to make everybody laugh when I say this prediction, because Brad, the first year we did predictions, it was 2020. Do you remember when the draft, it was like, it was COVID, and it was like everybody was watching the drafts from their homes? Then we had last year, which was, I guess, kind of like halfway normal, and now like this year it's like they're going to have like a real draft. It's going to be like a real draft again, right? So my prediction is that next week's draft will feel like the first real draft that we're watching since 2019. So I'm going on a limb and saying that the next week's draft will feel like the first real draft since 2019. So I know that
should do a live draft stream.
You know what? I'm open to it. I think a couple of people suggested to it. I mean, I would be okay with it if anybody wants.
If I get home by 8, and sometimes some nights that's a possibility, I could do it.
I'm open to it. I don't think I have anything booked Thursday. I don't think we have any wrestling in England. So I mean, if guys want to come on, I'll throw it out there. If some people listening here, they want to watch it. I mean, I got people tuned in right now. People are commenting. I mean, so and John Gonzalez is going to be facetious. I don't think I want to talk baseball tonight because you know what?
Oh God!
So this is why I'm not talking baseball, because John Gonzalez says here the biggest question is that will the Lions win the NFC Central? I mean, what do you think, John? The brute force. This is for you, right? They would always say this bud's for you. Well, this is the tagline for you. Well, this.
Well, I mean, first of all, it'd be nice for him to understand that the NFC Central has not existed since 2001.
Well, I'll say this to John Gonzalez. No, I am not picking the Lions to win their division, but if they do win the division, John Gonzalez, we should throw a party together. I'll say that. We can throw a party together.
John Gonzalez paying for the party.
Yeah, absolutely. John Gonzalez paying for the party. He's the biggest Lions fan. He's the Detroit mascot.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
The last time the Lions won a division title is what, 1993? Is that? Am I correct in saying that, John Gonzalez? You're the Lions.
I feel like it was 1953.
They won in, I think, 93. I think 91 they won it, and I think 93, and they got bounced, if I'm not mistaken, against the Packers wild card weekend that year. I think, if I recall correctly, I think they won it the last week of the season. I think. And then they made the wild card a bunch of other times, but they didn't win the division. I think 93 they won the divisions the last time. Boy, some history, right? 1993, right? So I mean, and John Gonzalez says party All-American Burger. Yeah, I'm down with that. I mean, why not, right? If you're paying, I mean, I'll certainly come out for that. And Carlos says Carlos is funny. Carlos Chavez. Let's give it up for Carlos Chavez, because he must know something, because he's saying that the Detroit Lions will be in the Super Bowl with the New York Jets this year. So, I mean, well, listen, why don't we just own All-American Burger at this point? Forget about a party All-American Burger. We should have the whole day closed off for us at All-American Burger, right, John Gonzalez? Because you're paying for it, right? We can have the whole day to ourselves, All-American Burger, if it's going to be Lions, Jets in the Super Bowl. I mean, somebody in Vegas right now is probably listening to say, you know what? I'm going to all of a sudden bet that the Lions and Jets will be in the Super Bowl with each other. Boy, you want to talk about history there? I mean, that would be, I guess, that would be the equivalent of, I don't know, Indians and Cubs in the World Series, maybe more than that. I don't know. I mean, that'd be interesting. I mean, I don't even know if I want to really seriously think about that right now. I just like to see the Jets in the postseason. I mean, but it'd be nice, right? 2010 is the last time we're in the postseason, so it's been a while. So obviously, those are some of the things here. Before we get to closing thoughts, and it's funny. I was talking to Brad and even with Justin off the air. I thought, okay, we'll just run through these things quick, but that's not the case because we had so many people, thankfully, tuning in. That's always a good thing, right? When people are tuning in. That's always been the theme, I think, of our show. I had a show on Tuesday and I had like 200 comments. So I mean, this will probably get pretty close to that. So that's always a good thing. But I did want to bring it up before we get closing thoughts here, and I'll go with the guys and Justin first, and then Brad. I mean, Jay Wright leaving Villanova. I mean, I didn't see that one coming.
I don't think anybody did. And so much talk was about this being Coach K's last year, and he got the fanfare, he got the bouquets thrown at him, the retirement tour and all that, and here's Jay Wright, suddenly announcing his retirement and stepping down from being the head coach for Villanova basketball, which he was for the last 21 years. And at 60 years old, I think it was a bit of a shock that he retired this soon. But he certainly leaves the program in good hands. I mean, but at the same time, a lot of it was, just a lot of it was due to the recruiting of Jay Wright. So, at this time, it's going to be interesting for Villanova and how their off-season recruiting goes. And, obviously they're going to be still bringing back a pretty good roster next year. I mean, they did have a lot of veterans that, were on this club and, juniors and seniors, but I still think they're in pretty good shape for a few years to come. But, it's certainly going to be a changing of the guard in the Big East, and we'll see. We'll see if Villanova can remain the top of the Big East Conference.
You think about Villanova, and they had Rolly Massimino, and then they had Steve Lapis for a little while, and then obviously we saw Jay Wright. Obviously,
took over 2000 or 2001, yeah.
2001, and obviously he was at Hofstra. He was the hot commodity there, and
right.
The brute force. I guess I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to tie it in a way to James Dolan for John Gonzalez. I'll even throw it out there as a hearty har. But would there be any slight possibility, just for you, John Gonzalez, that I'm just going to be facetious, totally facetious, but just for you, John Gonzalez, in the fact that, I don't know, maybe Jay Wright's waiting a year to get a call from Mr. Dolan and the Knicks if Thibodeau doesn't work out after next season? Is that really what you're waiting for me to ask the brute force, John Gonzalez? Is that what you wanted me to say and tying in Dolan?
Well, let me first say this, all right? And John Gonzalez, you got to start getting used to, all right, no Knicks talk on Friday nights for a little while, all right? Unless there's some big story or something. Unless I hear about Donovan Mitchell being traded, all right, to the Knicks, all right, that might be the only time we talk about them, okay? But if you want to tie it in right now to this, Jay Wright, absolutely not. He's not going to be the coach of the New York Knicks, and he's not going to be any coach in the NBA. Because, listen, everyone's talking about, maybe he did this to become a coach in the NBA. He doesn't want to do that. If you heard what he had to say, he felt that he lost his edge a little bit, kind of, maybe didn't have the same energy like he had in the past to coach, and he felt that it was time. That he felt that it was his time to retire. And listen, obviously Jay Wright's one of the best coaches ever. With my success, I think he's one of those guys that kind of doesn't get as much of the recognition as the
because they're not like a super duper powerhouse Villanova. I mean, right. Mid-major.
But, I mean, he's a guy from any coach or someone who knows the game of basketball. You have a ton of respect. Yeah, Carlos, you're right, 100%. I actually
do want Carlos.
I agree with that, Carlos. Listen, I mean. He's just a well-respected coach and individual. I mean, a lot of people here on Long Island admire Jay Wright. obviously for his job at Hofstra, but also just his mentorship.
And we have a connection with that because our sort of friend, somebody you obviously played against, Ryan Highlands, John Jay College Bloodhounds. The John Jay College Bloodhounds, the basketball team, the doghouse, the basketball court, Jay Wright and the Villanova Wildcats used to practice there regularly when they were in the area. So we have a little connection there.
And also our buddy Jason Gaudiezzo, who went to Villanova.
Yep.
So,
we're going to get to him when we close in a few minutes. We'll get to him.
Yeah. So listen, again, he should go down as one of the best coaches ever in college basketball. Should be right in that conversation with Coach K and all the rest of those guys. He was a tremendous coach, and he did it by example. His philosophies were great. Like Justin said, he put that Villanova program on the map. He put it in great hands. And he's one of the best coaches that we all hope that we can continue to learn from, whether he's, at events. I'd love to potentially attend one of his events if he's talking. As a coach, I'd really like to learn.
Coach Highland used to mention those to me. Coach Highland has been to many of those. I would get that a lot.
Again, it's a sad day or sad time to hear that he's leaving as well. Like Justin said, unexpectedly, you'd think he would go for a lot more years. But, sometimes when it's time, you make the decision. You never know. Maybe he will, after a year come back and maybe decide to. But ultimately, I think he's just done. He wants to move on. He should not coach the NBA, and I don't think he will. And John Gonzalez, just please, all right, please, all right. If you're missing him so much, all right, why don't you try to counsel him and try to help him?
I mean, MSG's gonna have. Let's see, the Knicks are out, right? So MSG is gonna in a month from now. They're gonna have no content because all they'll have is the Rangers because the Islanders are gonna be done next week. The Devils are gonna be next week. So that means you'll see plenty of Julius Randle because they'll play best of Knicks. That's all they'll have on MSG for the next 5 months.
What do you mean best of Knicks? There ain't no best of nothing this season.
It's MSG though, but MSG will window package it like it was a great season. They do it every year, Brad. Come on, you know it. I know it. Justin knows it. The world knows it.
Yep.
You're gonna see in June best of Knicks until Knicks Summer League. You're going to see Knicks footage galore. Those 37 wins, they'll package every single one of them.
That's exactly why I will not be watching MSG until next year. So there you go.
Okay, touche. And obviously, Carlos says, can you imagine if he would have announced his retirement alone?
Would have gotten no publicity. This is almost comparable to Roy Williams just stepping away after last season. There was no announcement for Roy Williams. He just said, "You know what, I'm done." You know what, and like you said, Brad, coaches know when it's time. If you think about what he's done at Villanova, it's almost like what Gonzaga wishes they were.
Good point.
You see these smaller schools because I wouldn't say Villanova's a mid-major per se because they're a major college program. But they're not in the Power 5 conference.
They're not. Yeah, they're not.
Conferences
UCLA.
we think of that also are big for football as well. Villanova's not that. We've seen Gonzaga have
very tough.
But Villanova has been but Villanova's been able to win the championship twice, and Gonzaga hasn't.
Right.
Tom, hold on real quick. I'm going to make John Gonzalez's day. I actually do have a comment on Julius Randle. I just remembered this. All right, I got a comment because here's the thing about Julius Randle, okay? A few days ago, now this actually ties into what we talked about earlier in the show. Did anyone see where Julius Randle was a few days ago?
Yes. He was at the Maverick game. He
was at the Dallas Mavericks game because he's from Dallas, so he's from Texas. He was at the Dallas Mavericks game sitting at courtside watching the Dallas Mavericks play. You know what? Maybe the Dallas Mavericks, maybe Brendan Fitzpatrick, all right, and Mark Cuban and all those Dallas Mavericks, maybe they want him, all right? If they want him, that'll make my day, all right? You guys can have him. You guys like New York Knicks. You've taken half our roster and put them on your roster. Now take Julius Randle because he clearly wants to play there. He was at your game. He was at your playoff game. Take Julius Randle, make my day, make my year, make my life as a New York Knicks fan. Might be the best thing that's happened.
He was also there with Worldwide West, and maybe it's a scout on maybe what Mavericks to bring to the Knicks because it's gonna hurt you when I say this, but I don't think there's any way they do move on from him. As much as I think they should, I think that the right thing to do would be moving on from them. I don't believe that they will.
Well, listen. I don't want to spend all day because Brad will get his blood pressure up. But
Yeah.
Leon Rose did say at the end of the season, before the game that tipped off
I'm
against the
surprised he
Raptors,
actually talked. He came out of hiding.
he said basically, "Look, Julius Randle's a good player. He still averaged 20 and 10." So that's your answer.
Yeah, well, yeah, his statistics look good. He forgot to mention all the other things that he's not good at.
There's a lot
But
of stats.
to just say one thing, Justin, on what you said. Yeah, he came out of his shell to talk on MSG Network, owned by James Dolan. Did not talk to anyone else. What kind
No
of
media, just a one-on-one with Breen.
right on MSG Network, and did not allow anyone else to come in and speak to him.
That reminds me.
That
You
right
guys
there.
remember the one year? I think was it Jeff Wilpon that did something? It was an exit interview. I think on SNY. I'm pretty sure. I think it was with Gary Apple one year. I'm pretty sure
That's different. Jeff Wilpon was the owner. This was the general manager of the basketball team who didn't speak once during the season. I mean, at some point you got to get some transparency.
It was
look at the number of things.
Yeah.
But look at the number of things that went on with the Brooklyn Nets and how many times Sean Marks talked to the media. The Knicks had their own drama this year, and not once did you hear from Leon Rose. You never got a media session with the media asking, "Okay, why didn't you do anything?"
I hate to make the comparison, and this will be the last word I'll say on the Knicks, and before we move on, because I didn't get to baseball. We'll do it next week. We'll have the baseball guys, and we'll do them. That's here nor there. But it's almost in a sense that Leon Rose reminds me in a way for what Garth Snow was as the Islanders general manager. For whatever reason, it's just like this goofy, like it's just poorly contrived. It's bad imaging. It's just got bad decisions. It's got that Garth Snow ownership, like person that they like to control, and that's what it reminds me so much of. And Carlos says, listen, we're going to move on from the Knicks, because you know what, I don't want to spend any more time on it because it's a waste of time. I will update people on scores real quick. Suns are up 7 against New Orleans, 1:16 left. Chris Paul has delivered tonight, 24 points, 14 assists. DeAndre Ayton has 28 points and 17 rebounds. JaVale McGee off the bench has 15 points. Baseball scores: Yankees 4-1 over the Cleveland Guardians. Mets, last I checked, are holding on for dear life against the D-backs, 5-4 right now in the bottom of the 8th. So we'll see what happens with that. So maybe it's better off we don't talk baseball, especially if the Mets do find a way to, going into the 9th inning. So
and look, but going back down to the most important score, and yeah, of course the Mets game is important, and I've had the TV on the Met game for a while. Is exactly what we talked about, getting other guys involved. And you talk about the big night of DeAndre Ayton and JaVale McGee off the bench.
15 points.
That's exactly what the Phoenix Suns are going to need without Devin Booker. And they got those performances, and they've delivered so far tonight. Now the game's not over, but you're seeing that other guys can clearly step up. And there's a reason why this team won 64 games this year.
No question about that. Obviously, listen, you still got to give them the edge. Certainly, if you win tonight, if you win tonight, no question that you definitely feel good, and certainly we have felt good here tonight. Certainly, again, this was one of the more. And you know what? I have to say, I didn't even know if we'd have a lively show because Billy McInerney cancels. Rob Maraska's at dinner, and Rob Maraska, I mean, he devotes himself to being on Sportswire Radio. He couldn't make, and Chris Pizzea couldn't make it. You're thinking, well, I don't know what to expect. And this was, again, one of the live here. And John Gonzalez says, time you to Mets. So John Gonzalez, I'm not going to disappoint you because I actually have on the 2015 NL Championship shirt.
So do I. I got the shirt too.
So John Gonzalez, unfortunately or fortunately, you couldn't see it, but I'm actually wearing a Mets shirt. So we all have a Mets shirt. We have a clean sweep.
The funniest part of the show is the fact that we all wore Mets shirts and we talk no baseball.
But people didn't want us to talk baseball tonight. People did not want to talk baseball.
But yeah, it's exactly what I said to you in the Sportswire radio chat prior. The NBA playoffs is the hot thing going on right now, and obviously this is the last show that we're doing prior to the NFL draft. So Absolutely. Those are clearly the two most important things on the docket. It's a regular season night in April. where there's still
Well,
150
listen,
left.
you guys and Brad, you know this because you've been doing this with me a long time. In June, there ain't gonna be NBA much to talk about. You're not gonna have NHL. We ain't an NHL show. NFL, you're gonna
Yeah.
have much more limited stuff. All it's gonna be is baseball. Well, what did you think about that? Then we'll have the baseball guys, and people will hear it, and that's great. Listen, and listen, I love baseball. I love all the sports. I love everything we do on Sportswire, but you go with the flow, and we had people commenting, and they wanted to hear basketball and football, and we give the people what they want. So,
Don Gonzalez, make sure you got a Mets shirt. Also, you might have to go to your favorite place, Walmart, and purchase one.
well, maybe they have them on discount, right? Walmart has everything on discounts, right? So maybe you can get a discounted Mets shirt. Remember, when everybody would go to Modell's, you get the $10 discounted Mets shirt with no player on it. You just get the back shirt say Mets on it. Like I used to always get those all the time. My parents would give them to me. Here you go, because they couldn't afford like the player on the back. So, and Carlos says Target has Mets gear. Yeah, but Target and John says I have a Tom Seaver. All right. Well, I hope you have a baseball card of Tom Seaver, John, because then you could use that money to fund the party at All American Burger after we have the Jets in the Super Bowl, right? So we can certainly fund the party with the Tom Seaver things here. And Carlos says Walmart has Steelers gear. Yeah. Well, Walmart would have that because that's Walmart. But those are some of the things we've talked about here tonight on Sportswire Radio and much, much more. And I want to get to closing thoughts here. And Justin, I want to also give you the floor, but I know there was something special that happened for you because Justin, for those that are listening and watching this, was also a very decorated baseball player in his own right. Also was a high school baseball player in the great state of New Jersey. And there was a pretty cool feat that I wanted out there for those that are listening and watching us to go out there. So in addition to that, Justin, let us know what that was. Also, give us some closing thoughts where we can get in touch with the Baseball Banter. We have a new show that we're going to be playing tomorrow as well, so we're excited to hear that. And so I want to give you the floor, anything you want to plug, and also talk about that little special moment that means so much to you. And the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, sure. So back from 2006 into 2010, I attended Lyndhurst High School in Northeast Jersey, and one of my assistant coaches was a man by the name of Patrick Autieri, and he was a big help under Frank Butch Servideo, who was our head coach at the time, and he in his own right won. I think he won over 400 games. I know he won plenty with us, especially a state championship in 2008. But Patrick Autieri was named the replacement after Coach Servideo retired, and this just recently, Coach Autieri won his 100th game as head baseball coach at Lyndhurst. And one of the things that has been very special about the school is the school's baseball program, and their sports program as a whole has really improved over the last decade. Like their football program has been much better. There's been a player who has been on and off practice squads in the NFL, and Petey Guerrero. He played at Lyndhurst High School and went to Monmouth University. But I just wanted to give that special shout out. Even though I'm not around Lyndhurst as much as I used to be because I live in New York now, that's still my home. That's where I grew up, and I'm as a former baseball player, I'm very proud of that moment. So. Very happy about that. As for the Baseball Banter, you can find that on my Twitter account at bballbantersm or my personal Twitter at jgnle12. Unfortunately, thanks to the Brooklyn Nets, I was in no mood to record a show Wednesday night. That's why the show was delayed until Thursday. And then I gave you the episode, I think, late last night or early this morning. So, but that's out now. And then obviously I'll have the weekend recap. And, we didn't get a chance to talk about either on my show or here about Miguel Cabrera getting his 3,000th hit because he was 0 for 3 yesterday. And then you had that intentional walk, which obviously was the right move when the Yankees were trying to keep it at 1-0 at that point in the bottom of the 8th yesterday. And then today, the Detroit Tigers against the Rockies that got rained out. And yes, I know all about Teddy Shoebridge. His brother was a track coach at the school and a gym teacher during my school days. there. So, I know the whole story, and I've seen We Are Marshall multiple times. So I know all too well about that story.
So sad about that, but obviously we want to congratulate Coach Orteri there for that correct milestone that we got to speak about, and obviously anything we can do. And also, Justin, you warmed my heart because I just followed you on LinkedIn. You're actually advertising Sportswire Radio. You're on the team. So I wrote you a nice little note there so you get that on LinkedIn. So you definitely made me feel good. Anytime I see anybody advertising Sportswire Radio, that makes me feel good. And I'm just always amazed at so many people that are a part of the station and they message me left and right and how grateful they are to be here with us, and whether it's on our live streams or on our radio dial, sportnarium.com/player. And that definitely makes me humbled and certain.
Yeah, I'm just, I was doing some updating recently. I know I hadn't been on LinkedIn in a couple of years. I didn't even know my password. I just did a password reset and log in because I didn't even have my couple previous jobs. That's how long it's been since I've been on there. So I wanted to update that, and then I wanted to make sure that was on there.
I appreciate that. You know what? I had a nice message from Neil Villapiano yesterday, and it sounded like he was going to choke up and how much it means to him to be on the station. And I get all the different presenters that message us here, and I want to thank them for that opportunity. And I always tell people it's the old expression that John F. Kennedy always would say is a rising tide lifts all boats. So we always try to lift everybody's boats. That's all we try to do here on Sportswire Radio. And certainly that brings me here to the Brute Force Brad Weiss, who's going to try and lift a lot of people's boats here with closing thoughts here. Obviously, we'll definitely have a lot to say, I'm sure. Here we've got some announcements from friends of the show, I'm sure, that we'll get into, and anything else on your mind. Certainly was a lively Sportswire Radio here tonight. It's always lively at this point. Listen, it's always lively, but I want to give you the floor. You definitely know the drill by now, and I turn it over to you, my friend, and fire away.
Yeah, Tom, thank you again for another great edition of Friday Night Live here on Sportswire Radio. Thank you to everybody who was listening and participating and commenting. It means a lot to us, being engaged and making the show more fun than it already is. So thank you to everybody who is supporting and listening tonight. My social media is at bweiss20 on Instagram, at bweiss, at BradWeiss20 on Twitter. At bweiss20 Instagram, at BradWeiss20 on Twitter, and searching Bradley Weiss on Facebook. So you can find me there. Obviously, a lot I could get into, but I want to thank everyone who supported me. I want to give a shout out, as I always do. Every time I get a nice fresh cut, it's always Sal the Barber. So make sure you follow him on Instagram at Sal the Barber 91. He's in Hicksville, Michael's Barbershop. Be sure to give him a stop. If you need a good haircut, he's there for you, Sal the Barber, at Sal the Barber 91 on Instagram. Make sure you give him a follow. Per our St. Joseph's Long Island, no longer St. Joseph's College Long Island, I did see Coach Codiezo's post. They got new stands coming into the Danzy Center, so I'm happy to see that they're doing some upgrades to the Danzy Center, doing a great job. So shout out to them at St. Joe's. Also give a shout out to my guys, Brian McNeely and Matt Hurd, who are running the Long Island Sound. Unfortunately, if everybody wanted to know how the scrimmage went, we did not have the scrimmage because of a late schedule change. But ultimately, we are looking to do that yet again, once again in the future. So we didn't get to do it this week, but we'll get to do it in the future. So we're excited about that. But you should make sure you follow the Long Island Sound on Instagram as well. At Long Island Sound, they do a great job with their program out in Suffolk County. I'm certainly excited to see how they do in their weekend tournament, as well as my team, I got 4 games to coach tomorrow. So we're in the Level Up Lightning tournament. You can follow Level Up at levelup_LI. Will be fun to see how we do on our first tournament of the spring season. So all exciting things. Certainly excited to talk more sports, but thank you, Justin, Tom. Had a great night again. Certainly excited. The only thing that went wrong was that the Atlanta Hawks won, and James Cronin won't shut up. So that's basically the only bad thing that
deal with that. You better not show your face at Rico's on Sunday. That's all I could say, because James Cronin's going to run that restaurant like it's no tomorrow.
Well, again, he'll be making an appearance on the show soon. I told him he's going.
We'd love to have him. Listen, we pretty much love to have everybody at this point. So I do want to congratulate him on the victory. Also congratulate the Brute Force on all those things, and of course, Shout out to Matt Hurt and, of course, Ryan McNeely, because they are a part of the tennis team. And I promise to give a shout out to, of course, to our tennis team. Of course, our St. Joseph's New York tennis team. Gordon Scheuer is also a part of the tennis team. And I want to make sure everybody follows the tennis team and keep up to date with all the things that the team is doing when it comes to tennis and everything else. You can do that on Instagram at SJCWMTEN. That is, of course, the official Instagram page of the St. Joseph's, I guess, New York women's and men's tennis teams. And of course, I was speaking with the guys and on the team and some of the new additions. And again, it's very, very interesting to watch them play and such. And we like to see some more of the players continue to do great things, and they are definitely doing that. So I want to congratulate Ryan and Gordon for being a part of the tennis team and all the great things that they are doing with that as well. Also want to give a huge shout out, which I promised, the first of a few. I want to give a shout out to Spencer Malloy, which I want to give Big Spence a huge shout out for, because I was speaking with Big Spence before we went on the air. And of course, Big Spence is now a member of the All-Met third team honors, which he earned from the Met Basketball Writers Association as they released their 2022 end of season awards this past Monday. And of course, Big Spence was a D3Hoops.com all-region third team and Skyline Conference all-conference first team as a rookie, and he became the first Gold Eagle to do it since your old teammate, the Brute Force, Andy Laurent, back in 2017. And of course, Malloy was a three-time Skyline Conference Rookie of the Week, finishing ninth in the conference and scoring only ninth, 15.2 points a game, fifth in rebounds, 8 a game. He was third in field goal percentage, 54.9%, also scored 15-plus points or more in 11 games this season, and of course, tailed a season-high 28 points against Hunter on November the 23rd. He was one of 4 student-athletes from the Skyline Conference to earn all-Met honors, including somebody we know named Ryan Terrell and Gabe Leifer over at Yeshiva, so congratulations to them. But most importantly, congratulations to, of course, our very dear friend, Big Spencer Malloy from St. Joseph's, New York. Now, of course, he is from Comac, 6'4" center, sophomore, but really a freshman. So obviously, congratulations to Spencer. You can follow the team SJCMBB on Instagram, SJC_MBB also on Twitter. Also want to congratulate, as I promised, our very dear friend, Mr. Jason Gordiesa, because he is the newest member of the Williams Advancement Agency. And I'm going to take credit for this one because Michael Williams, who was the coach of the City College, where Coach Gordiesa was an assistant there, actually, I was the one that actually suggested that, because I am, of course, very good friends with Coach Williams and very good friends with Coach Gordiesa. And I remember saying actually to Coach Gordiesa, which the Brute Force, you would be a witness to, that he would be a good candidate to work with Coach Williams once again, because the Williams Advancement Agency does a phenomenal job in promoting coaches and getting them opportunities like ours and others. And Coach Gordiesa will be a great candidate for that. Congratulations to Coach on that. I know that big things are ahead from Coach Gordiesa, and I know he took himself out of the running for the Villanova job because he is a Villanova alum, because obviously they made the hiring very quickly when it came to the process. But congratulations to Coach Gordiesa. You can follow Coach Gordiesa on all the things that he's up to, most especially on Instagram at Jason Gordiesa. Very simple. Also does in his day job, he's also involved in finance, so maybe he can help us in terms of figuring out what to do with the stock market, because my mutual fund right now is not doing too good. Let me just put it that way. But obviously, that's okay. We'll figure that out for another time. But congratulations, Coach Gordiesa, on a well-deserved thing with the Williams Advancement Agency. We've had many friends of this year, like Coach Xavier Chernak and Ashley Yu. They've been on, Terry All. So great stuff with that. So if you are on sportnerd.com/player, you are getting an all-new sit-down marks. I want to thank everybody that has tuned in here. I don't have much of a voice at this point, so we'll just pretty much get to the points. If you are on all of our platforms here, when it comes to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name them, we'll be back here. I believe we're going to be back live, I guess, Tuesday night, and maybe, just maybe, we'll now do an NFL stream. So maybe if an NFL draft stream, if some guys want to do it, I'm happy to do it. We'll figure that out. We'll make the details for sure during the week. I'll make an announcement for that. So if you're on sportnerd.com/play, you're getting an all-new sit-down marks. If you're on all of our other social media platforms, thank you for watching. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for all the comments. I want to thank John Gonzalez, Anthony Finkel, Carlos Chavez, and Laura, Dirty Bird, everybody else that's sharing all of our stuff on Sportswire Radio. I think we had something like 1,000 views on all of our streams on Tuesday. We'll probably get pretty much close to that tonight. So Thank you, everybody. I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sportswire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryson. Join me as Justin Gianelli of the Baseball Banter Show, which you'll hear later this afternoon, evening. The brute force Brad Weiss, who's doing low on the voice. So obviously, and John Gonzalez has one more comment. No Chris, no Trotty, but my boy Brute and Justin came through. Let's give Justin a round of applause. Yeah, but no Trotty. Trotty's got a new job or whatever, and he's not with us. But Chris will be back next week. Chris had, I think, a family thing, but Chris will definitely be back. He definitely wanted to be here, and we'll get Rob Maraska for sure and Billy McInerney, and we'll go from there. But thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Good night, John Gonzalez. Thank you for being with us and everybody else. And we'll be back next week on Sportswire Radio, the #1 global radio station.